Chapter 1158. The Qingming River surged from the north to the south, and suddenly made a big turn here, pouring down to the southeast and into the sea. A few hundred miles away from this turn was Magic Cloud City, which was connected to the Qingming River by a canal. Lu Ping, Lu Tianyuan, and Lu Tianyuan took a detour, and finally didn't encounter any more disciples from the 5 sacred grounds. Puzzled, Lu Tianyuan asked, "Junior Martial Brother, are you sure what will happen next will happen here?" Lu Ping said with certainty, "Even if it doesn't happen here, it will definitely pass by here. Let's just wait and see." 3 days later, the Northern Alliance's ship finally pierced through the morning mist. The huge ship was like a giant beast from ancient times, cutting through the surging Qingming River and appearing in the sight of Lu Ping and the others. In fact, Lu Ping saw the ship before the other two because not only did Lu Ping's eyes have the 3 pure eyes, but after his Dharma form went through the first lightning tribulation and formed the eagle eyes, Lu Ping's vision was even further. The 3 of them were on a low hill 10 miles away from the turn of the Qingming River. Originally, Tian Tian and Tian Yuan thought that this place was a little too far from the Qingming River, but Lu Ping said that it was better to be close than far. The huge ship was still mighty and majestic, but the many marks on the ship showed that the Northern Alliance's journey was not smooth sailing. When the ship got closer, the scene on the ship became even clearer. There were obvious cracks on the ship's hull, and dense runes could be seen. Obviously, the ship's protective array had been damaged a lot. The 3 of them hid themselves on the hill, but they did not hide their auras. As the treasured ship got closer, the 3 of them could clearly sense that more and more cultivators who followed the treasured ship had arrived. They hid themselves as well. Many of them also took notice of the hill that the 3 of them were on. However, when they sensed the auras of the 3 of them, they avoided them. At this moment, Lu Ping sighed softly and said in a low voice, "Iron Lock River crossing technique. They even used this kind of unorthodox magical power." Tian Tian had obviously heard of this magical power and said in surprise, "Iron Lock River crossing technique? Who used it? Can it stop the ship?" As soon as Tian Tian finished speaking, the treasured ship that was moving against the current suddenly slowed down. The huge ship continued to move forward with great inertia, but it was blocked by a force hidden in the water. A clear wave that crossed the surface of the Qingming River stretched forward with the treasured ship as the center, forming a huge triangle. Creak, creak, creak. A teeth-aching sound came from the body of the treasure ship, followed by a series of crisp cracking sounds. Dozens of talismans engraved on the body of the ship cracked one after another. With such a trick, you think you can stop the ship?" A gloomy and cold shout came from the treasured ship. Immediately after, the entire treasured ship suddenly lit up, and dense spirit energy emerged from the surroundings of the treasured ship, enveloping the entire ship in a thin layer of mist. "Not good, retreat quickly." Someone sensed that something was wrong, and immediately shouted, but it was too late. A huge gust of wind suddenly surged outside the ship, blowing the sails that were hundreds of feet high like a bowstring. The ship, which had already stopped, tried to move forward again. Crackle! In the struggle, the protective runes on the ship cracked again, and the whole ship looked like it was full of cracks, almost taking up a quarter of the ship's body. Bang! The wave that had been blocking the boat was now like a broken bowstring. It was forcefully broken by the boat, and the 20 or so Dharma adepts who had been hiding on both sides of the Qingming River and had worked together to set up this iron locks across the river spell were now exposed. More than 10 of them were sent flying into the air because their level of practice was not high enough. The remaining 8 or 9 mid-Dharma adepts were not sent flying, but they also spat out blood and looked dispirited. Only the great adepts who were in charge of the spell on each side looked pale for a moment, but they quickly recovered and looked fine. The ship, which had broken the Iron Lock River spell, suddenly moved forward. Because of the previous accumulation of power, it had increased its speed. "Not good, it's going to run. Stop it." Shouts came from all around, and many of the adepts who were hidden in the air appeared. But for a moment, no one dared to go forward and attack the ship. The blocking spell that the 20 Dharma adepts had set up under the command of the 2 Grand Adepts had been easily broken by the ship. These people who dared to attack the ship were all smart as ghosts. Although they were shouting, they did not take a step forward, only hoping that someone else would be the first bird to take the lead. The east was getting brighter, and a fireball jumped out from the ground. In an instant, it shone brightly, breaking through the heavy fog on the surface of the river. The blinding light made many people feel uncomfortable for a moment. Something's wrong, retreat. Lu Tianyuan and Tian Tian had never thought that they would hear Lu Ping's panicked voice one day. Although they did not know what Lu Ping had discovered, they did not dare to be slow. The three of them rose into the air and flew behind the hill. A strange whistling sound came faintly from the sky. Why was there a whistling sound? In the process of flying back, Lu Tianyuan and Tian Tian looked at the surface of the river again. This time, they finally saw the reason clearly and they gasped. Originally, they were slightly hesitant to fly back, but now they were determined and even faster. It was a ray of sword light. At the moment of sunrise, it stood out from the light of heaven and earth that shone on all things. In an instant, it even overshadowed the golden crow in this area. The heavens and the earth lost color, and the world was silent. In the universe, only the power of this sword could cover the heavens and the earth. And the weather changed. The faint whistling sound in the sky was the sound of this shocking sword breaking the sound barrier and rushing over to meet up with it. But then, it was completely drowned out by the earth-shaking scene here. A sword came from the east. It was majestic and large, and it slashed directly toward the treasured boat. The blazing light caused the eyes of all the cultivators on both sides of the azure Netherworld River to be completely bright. Among them, only the cold voice that came from the treasured boat resounded, and it was a furious roar filled with terror. Lu Ping, who was flying back, suddenly turned green and red, and two green and red rays shot out 2 feet long. For a moment, even the shocking sword light that changed the color of heaven and earth couldn't cover Lu Ping's sight. The Qingming River, which was dozens of miles long, suddenly sank, forming a huge ditch that was 30 feet wide and more than 100 feet deep. The treasure ship suddenly sank for 100 feet, and it seemed that it would be swallowed by the river water on both sides at any time. However, the reason why the treasure ship was called a treasure ship was that it was the foundation of several generations of cultivators, and it could be said to be one of the treasures with the highest achievements in the cultivation world. How could it be destroyed by a single blow? Even this shocking sword light couldn't do it. With the loud shout just now, a huge shield suddenly lit up on the treasure ship, and then it condensed into a huge palm above the shield, grabbing at the sword light that came from the sky. Puchi! The palm was immediately cut off, and the sword light continued to slash down. Boom! The array formation of the treasure ship suddenly dimmed, and the talismans on the body of the ship exploded. 2/3 of the talismans on the body of the ship suddenly exploded, and the entire body of the treasure ship sank more than 3 feet into the river again. But in the end, the treasured ship was still able to withstand this heaven-shaking attack. However, although the sword light that covered the sky was blocked, it immediately shattered, and the sharp force still invaded the body of the ship. Whoosh! The full sail of the treasure ship immediately fell down, and the treasure ship that was originally speeding slowly slowed down on the surface of the river until it completely lost the power to move forward. In the blink of an eye, the blazing light that covered the sky suddenly dissipated, and the river water that was more than 10 feet deep that was cut by the sword light surged back. The treasure ship that was originally in the ditch suddenly jumped up, and the huge body of the ship was now like a toy on the surface of the river. There was a dead silence on both sides of the river, as if they had been stunned by the shocking attack just now. Then, a few corpses suddenly appeared in the river, obviously the cultivators who had been hiding in the Qingming River before. Then, from the forest on both sides of the river, like a swarm of frightened birds, dozens of figures flew out into the distance. Most of these cultivators were in the Dharma plain, but at this moment, they were all in a mess. Obviously, although the sword light that covered the sky did not hurt them, it made them suffer a lot. Lu Ping and the other two retreated all the way, but in the end, they were not affected by this shocking sword light. However, Tian Tian and Lu Tianyuan still looked shocked. Lu Tianyuan's eyes widened, and he exclaimed, "What a powerful sword light! What kind of person could perform such a shocking sword light?" Lu Ping raised his head and looked toward the gradually rising sun in the east, and suddenly said, "It's coming." The two followed Lu Ping's gaze, and in their eyes, there was still a glaring sunlight, but they could not see anything clearly. At this moment, the sky full of sunlight suddenly condensed, and another sword light that covered the sky was formed, slashing toward the treasure ship on the Qingming River from afar. Just as the sword light was formed and the sky full of sunlight was retracted, Lu Tianyuan and Tian Tian finally faintly saw a figure walking toward them in the sunlight. It really is him. Who? Sky-splitting sword Saint Xiaobai. It's him. No wonder. 2/3 of the northern ship's protective barrier had been destroyed by the talismans on its hull. The barrier's power had been reduced to less than 1/10 of its original state. There was no way it would be able to withstand the sword that had dimmed the light of the world. The cold sound of the sword whistling sounded again, and an equally brilliant sword light came from the north bank of the Qingming River. Halfway through, it collided with the light in front of it, and the brilliant sword light immediately shattered. However, although the light in front of it had dimmed a lot, it still continued forward. "Xiaobai, that's enough." An angry roar came from the south bank, and the rolling sound waves condensed in midair, actually condensing into a crystal shield in midair. The shield shattered when the sword light came down, but at the same time, the shattered space also destroyed the sky full of sword qi. Chapter 1159. "Xiaobai, that's enough." Amidst his furious roar, the surging sound waves actually condensed into a spatial shield in midair, and it blocked the sword light that had been worn down by the previous sword light. Haha! A light laugh resounded through the heavens and the earth. "Wang Xianqing, you're still so impatient. If it wasn't for that, how could the old man have killed LV Taiqing with a single strike?" "Umph." A muffled groan resounded through the heavens and the earth, causing Lu Tianyuan and Wang Xuanqing's blood to surge, and they looked at each other in shock. Only Lu Ping's expression remained unchanged, and his eyes flickered with a green light as he stared at the distant river. "Xiaobai, today is the day you die. Tsk Wang Xianqing, you're still so arrogant. LV Taiqing was already dead when you said those words last time. So why didn't you restrain yourself at all? Who will it be this time? Just you and this Bailey Changtian from the Skyward Pavilion?" "Haha, fellow Taoist Xiao. I didn't expect that you would actually recognize me. It's an honor to meet you." Fellow Taoist Bailey's spatial ability is quite good, but it's only good. This Wang Xianqing must have been kicked in the head by a donkey. Could it be that fellow Taoist Bailey doesn't know? Fellow Taoist Xiao is a heavenly genius. Fellow Taoist Wang and fellow Taoist Bailey might not be able to do anything to you. But what if I join in? A sonorous voice resounded from the west. When Lu Ping and the others looked towards the west, they saw a sky full of rainbow lights, but they couldn't clearly see the figures within. "The Lingyun Valley's unfettered one has also arrived, so I can fight the three of you to my heart's content. Come, this blood-boiling feeling seems to have disappeared for a long time, and I'm even a little impatient." An earth-shaking sword cry resounded, as if it was catering to its master's current state of mind. "Don't be anxious." Another unfamiliar voice came from the left side of Xiaobai. "Fellow Taoist Zhao's heaven-shattering sword is unparalleled in the world. I believe it won't be a problem for the old man to learn from you." Xiaobai's expression did not change, as if he had already expected this. He smiled and said, "Aha, I didn't expect Konoha from Wuxia School to be here as well. 4 pure young immortals from the 5 sacred lands have come. If the 9 mystical tower doesn't have anything to say, wouldn't it be disappointing? Haha, fellow Xiao is truly unparalleled in the world. Today you've entered our 5-man game, yet you're still so carefree. It truly makes us feel ashamed. However, today, we have no choice but to fight you with numbers and experience fellow Zhao's peerless sword technique." Sure enough, just as Xiaobai pointed out the 9 mystical tower, a voice came from the right side behind him. It was a woman. Xiaobai was slightly surprised and said, 8th Sister Zhu has also passed the 3rd lightning tribulation. This is a cause for celebration. Initially, I thought it would be boring to face these old fellows. I didn't expect 8th Sister Zhu to be the first among the second-generation disciples to pass the lightning tribulation. However, I wonder how many second-generation cultivators from the other sacred lands are like 8th Sister Zhu. Those who were defeated by my sword back then, but were still unconvinced. Have they ever achieved as much as 8th Sister Zhu? 8th Sister Zhu of the 9 Mystical Tower was obviously the only second-generation disciple among the pure Yang Laozu from each of the 5 sacred lands. In fact, Xiao Baiyu was also a second-generation cultivator. Moreover, from Xiao Baiyu's words, it could be seen that the outstanding second-generation cultivators of the 5 sacred lands had also reached the critical stage of advancing to the pure Yang realm. However, it seemed that only 8th Sister Zhu of the 9 Mystical Tower had taken this step first. How could the other 4 pure Yang Laozu not hear the sarcasm in Xiao Baiyu's words? For a moment, they could not help but feel a little embarrassed. After all, the 5 sacred lands still cared about their reputation. This time, the 5 sacred lands had joined forces to conspire against Xiao Baiyu. After this, it would definitely cause a huge storm in the cultivation world. If there were really second-generation cultivators among the sects who had achieved the pure Yang realm, they would definitely push their second-generation disciples to deal with Xiao Baiyu, just like the 9 Mystical Tower did. Instead of pushing several first-generation pure Yang Laozu to fight with numbers and bully the weak at the same time, 8th Sister Zhu giggled and said, "Your existence can no longer be measured by common sense. The cultivation world has always been balanced, but you just happen to have the strength to break the balance. With this strength, you can slowly advance to the true soul level." Which of the Laozu who had achieved the true soul level in the past wasn't like that? When that time comes, who can do anything to you? But you just happen to be the one who breaks the norm now. Who knows? The 6 sacred lands might even throw away their reputation to erase your existence. Since you already have the reputation of bullying the weak with numbers, why should you care about being bullied by the strong? These words were clearly directed at Xiao Baiyu, but in fact, they were directed at the other pure Yang Laozu. Although these pure Yang Laozu stood at the top of the cultivation world, how could they not be burdened by fame? Instead, they were not as thorough as a woman like 8th Sister Zhu. Xiao Baiyu smiled bitterly and said, "8th Sister Zhu is still a woman who is not inferior to men. It seems that you still bear a grudge against me." It would have been fine if 8th Sister Zhu had not heard this, but when she heard Xiao Baiyu's words, she immediately frowned and scolded. "If you had promised me back then, I would have been willing to betray the 9 Mystical Tower for you. Today, I would have risked my life to deal with the 6 sacred lands. If I had blinked, I would not be a woman. But since you have made your choice, we are just passers-by. Today we each serve a different master, so it is a fight to the death. There is no second choice." This 8th Sister Zhu was obviously a master who had no taboos. In front of the other pure Yang Laozu, she only cared about her own matters, and even said words like betraying the 9 Mystical Tower. This kind of boldness caused the other Laozu to either be stunned or shake their heads. Purple Sun Palace's pure Yang Laozu Wang Xianqing shouted, "What nonsense are you talking about? It was not easy to set up this situation today. This person has always been crafty, so he might have a countermeasure. We should end this quickly, lest there are changes." Unexpectedly, just as Wang Xianqing finished speaking, Xiao Baiyu had already slashed at Wang Xianqing with his sword, but he smiled and said, "You know me best, fellow Taoist Xianqing. No wonder you cooperated with me to kill Lu Taiqing back then. Otherwise, how could Purple Sun Palace have your illustrious status today?" Wang Xianqing was furious and said, "Nonsense. A dignified pure Yang cultivator actually dares to say such childish provocative words. Ugh." Wang Xianqing wanted to use the flying sword in his hand to parry, but unexpectedly, it was sent flying by Xiao Baiyu's sword. The blood in his body shook, and he retreated dozens of feet in midair. He had suffered a loss right from the start. Originally, even if Xiao Baiyu's strength was far superior to those of the same level, it should not have been enough to make Wang Xianqing suffer such a loss right from the start. However, Xiao Baiyu had already begun to gather strength during his conversation with the others. After he attacked with his full strength, Wang Xianqing was unable to react in time, and immediately suffered a loss. Even so, the other pure young Laozu was secretly shocked. No matter how careless Wang Xianqing was, he was still a true pure young cultivator after all. There was no reason for him to be forced back by Xiao Baiyu in one blow. He thought to himself that it was no wonder this person could kill pure young cultivators when he had just advanced to the late Dharma stage. Although he had used a trick at the time, no pure young cultivator in the cultivation world would dare to underestimate him again. Now that he had advanced to the pure young stage, his strength was probably even stronger. This person was already a great threat if they did not get rid of him today. If they did not kill him today, there would be few who could withstand his revenge in the future. Xiao Baiyu laughed loudly. Wang Xianqing, you are still so careless. You are a pure young Laozu, and you have cultivated for thousands of years. Did you live like a dog? Eighth sister Zhu scolded. You talk too much. Eat my fork first. Before the flying fork could reach Xiao Baiyu, it had already turned into 36. This kind of transformation was different from Lu Ping's sword qi edge, which condensed the qi of heaven and earth with his inner yuan. Instead, it was a kind of real magical power. Each flying fork was a real existence. The only difference was that when a flying fork was originally a second tribulation spiritual treasure, when it turned into 6 flying forks, each flying fork became a first tribulation spiritual treasure. When it turned into 36 flying forks, each of them only had the quality of a 9 Daos spirit nurturing treasure. However, they could form a flying fork formation in mid-air, and its power was even above that of a second tribulation spiritual treasure. After this flying fork formation was displayed, it was accompanied by a supreme magical power of the 9 mystical tower. Its power was unparalleled, and it directly fell on Xiao Baiyu. Eighth sister Zhu knew that Xiao Baiyu's battle strength was unparalleled among cultivators of the same level. Only the formation could restrain him. Although it was still unable to trap and kill him, it could give the others an opportunity to besiege him. Sure enough, after Xiao Baiyu's heaven-breaking sword broke through the Lingyun Valley Unfettered One's 7 rainbow kill, and then turned to slash Muyi Laozu's boundless falling wood into falling leaves to roots, she saw the flying fork formation falling from the sky. Xiao Baiyu immediately let out a strange cry and flicked his fingers at the heaven-breaking sword. With each flick of his finger, a sword shadow would be drawn out from the heaven-breaking sword. With 36 flicks of his fingers, 36 sword shadows soared into the sky. Each sword shadow accurately targeted a flying fork falling from the sky. No matter how Eighth Sister Zhu's flying fork formation changed in mid-air, it could not escape the pursuit of the sword shadows. Clang, 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 clang. A series of explosions resounded through the sky. Each sword shadow would be annihilated after hitting a flying fork, but the flying fork remained undamaged. However, the originally orderly flying fork formation was in a mess after being hit by the sword shadows. Even Eighth Sister Zhu's pure yang power could not reorganize the formation in a short period of time. One sword to break all techniques. This was one sword to break all techniques. Xiao Baiyu had a sword in hand. No matter how many changes there were, I'll break it with one sword. Wang Xuanqing's face was livid, but he did not say a word. The flying sword in his hand was launched again. Every time it trembled in the air, it turned into a crescent moon in the sky. 24 crescent moons were formed and turned into the new moon sword formation, one of the 6 supreme swordsmanship of Purple Sun Palace. He was originally the strongest among the 5 people who besieged Xiao Baiyu. According to the previous plan, he would temporarily entangle Xiao Baiyu at the beginning, and then the other 4 people would leisurely lay a trap and kill him in one fell swoop. Unexpectedly, Xiao Baiyu repelled him with all his strength as soon as he came up, so that he was far away from the battle group. Xiao Baiyu took the opportunity to fight with the other people, so he could not intervene for a while. Chapter 1160. Xiao Baiyu's attack instantly forced Wang Xianqing to retreat, broke the 7 rainbow kill, blocked the endless falling wood, and disrupted the flying fork formation. However, in the end, It was difficult for two fists to fight against four hands. Skyward Pavilion's Bailey Changtian took this opportunity to attack. The space around Xiao Baiyu suddenly began to condense, as if it wanted to freeze him within. Of course, this could not affect Xiao Baiyu. At the moment when the surrounding space began to freeze, the rising sun suddenly shone brightly, and the sunlight that illuminated the earth instantly turned into light blades and sharp swords that submerged into the surrounding frozen space. The space that had just frozen immediately shattered, and Xiao Baiyu easily escaped. Bailey Changtian's attack did not even cause him the slightest bit of trouble. However, Bailey Changtian did not actually expect his attack to affect Bailey Changtian. All he wanted was to fight for an opportunity for Wang Xianqing to intervene. The new moon sword formation suddenly fell, like a crescent moon falling to the ground. Even the rising sun seemed to be overshadowed by the moonlight. It wanted to completely strangle Xiao Baiyu. However, the dimmed sun was not the crescent moon formed by the new moon sword formation. Instead, it was because all the light in the world was focused on the man who was surrounded by everyone. In an instant, he seemed to have become the king of the heavens. All the light and heat in the world seemed to be focused on him. Scatter! The blazing sun fell, but it burst forth from his body again, and collided with the new moon that fell from the sky. There was a moment in the chaos between the heaven and earth. The heaven and earth did not darken, but the cultivators by the Qingming River felt that the heaven and earth seemed to become brighter in that instant. Although Lu Ping had expected this, he was still shocked when he saw the blazing sun like pure yang aura in the sky. As for the two people beside Lu Ping, they were so shocked that they could not speak. The six pure yang Laozu did not appear in front of everyone. Only Lu Ping saw the figure of Xiao Baiyu when he walked out of the light of the rising sun. After that, the sky was shrouded by clouds. Everyone could only feel the pure yang aura that appeared one after another. As for what happened in the clouds, they really did not know. It seemed that the six pure yang Laozu had opened up a space in the sky. In fact, this was indeed the case. Lu Ping knew that once a cultivator reached the pure yang level, they were already at the peak of this world. Their mastery of spatial magic had also reached the peak. Once the pure yang cultivators started a war, the damage they caused to this world was too great. This kind of spatial magic that they had just mastered allowed them to temporarily open up a space in the void as a battlefield. In fact, this kind of temporarily open space was not stable, and the aftermath of the battle would still fall on this world. However, after being filtered by the space, the divine powers and magic arts that were occasionally missed would cause minimal damage to this world. Usually, these secrets could only be understood or even experienced after one's cultivation had reached a certain level. Perhaps in some sacred grounds with a long history and many experts, or large sects with deep foundations, these things would be popularized by cultivators who had not yet reached a certain level. Lu Ping was born in Jinling. Although there had been a great sage Laozu who had great achievements 7,000 years ago, this Laozu might have been too outstanding. Not long after achieving pure yang, he transformed into a true spirit and disappeared. Therefore, the records after pure yang were almost blank. However, Lu Ping had obtained the pure yang soul of the Yingtian sect's Fei Tian Laozu in the Yingtian dojo. Although Fei Tian Laozu had already died, the memories contained in the pure yang soul had been preserved by Fei Tian Laozu using some kind of secret technique. After the passage of time, most of the memories contained in the pure yang soul had been lost. After Lu Ping accepted the pure yang soul, some of the memories were lost again. After Lu Ping overcame his first lightning tribulation, his Dharma idol and divine sense began fusing together due to the pure yang energy. Only then did the pure yang soul, which Lu Ping had refined for his own use, truly fuse with the dragon Dharma idol. The memories were lost once again, leaving behind only the things that were deeply rooted in Fei Tian Laozu. Previously, Deng Ming had been shocked by how clear Lu Ping's understanding of the many secrets of the world of cultivation was. In truth, it was because of the pure yang soul. However, the pure yang soul was one of Lu Ping's most important secrets. Naturally, he would not casually reveal it. At this time, Many of the cultivators hiding on both sides of the Qingming River knew that the current situation was not something they could handle. The more timid ones had even left quietly, but most of the cultivators were attracted by this rare spectacle in the world of cultivation. Although they could not detect what was happening in the misty space, this did not stop the many cultivators from being enthusiastic about the pure young Laozu's appearance. Some cultivators even tried to get close to the misty space in the sky until a moon flew out of the space. A mid-Dharma cultivator nearby was killed in one blow. Only then did the many cultivators retreat, but they were still unwilling to leave just like that. The misty space in the sky was tumbling violently. Clearly, there was a huge battle going on inside that affected the entire world of cultivation. In fact, the battle in the misty space had indeed entered a white-hot stage. Wang Xianqing had finally blocked half of Xiao Baiyu's attack, with a kind of craziness that seemed like he was ready to die. Although it was only half, it was enough because this was a siege. There were still 4 other pure young Laozu spying on Xiao Baiyu, who was surrounded by the spies, ready to give him a fatal blow the moment he revealed a flaw. Xiao Baiyu finally lost his relaxed demeanor from before. At this time, he was completely at a disadvantage, but that hint of mockery was still hanging from the corner of his mouth. Xiao Baiyu, do you still remember the reason you gave me back then? Eighth sister Zhu's giggling laughter always hid a hint of malice. Her seemingly vulgar and shrewd way of talking always had a kind of frightening feeling. The sect just for your skyrend. Haha, from now on, the sky-splitting sword sect will no longer exist in this world. Who are you living for? You might as well surrender. Perhaps, for the sake of our past friendship, I will only destroy your bloodline and shatter the Dharma form in your heart core space. Perhaps, because of the nourishment of your real essence during the process of dispersing, you can still live for a few decades, enough for you to spend the rest of your life as a mortal. Otherwise, you will die today. At this time, Wang Xianqing also laughed wildly and said, Xiao Baiyu, you were born overseas, but now why do they want to lure you to the central region to besiege and kill you? How can the Crystal Palace not participate in such a grand event? I think the sky-splitting sword sect has long been destroyed in the world. Xiao Baiyu laughed coldly. What is this? Are you trying to disturb my mind? What a childish trick. Mu Yi Laozu snorted coldly and said, You won't shed a tear until you see the coffin. It's useless to say more. This person is tricky, so we should cut the Gordian knot. Seeing that everyone had the upper hand at this time, Xiao Yaozi immediately laughed. Fellow Wang has a deep hatred, while fellow Zhu has an old hatred. Both of you don't want fellow Xiao to die quickly. Bailey Changtian once again formed a great mountain seal, and a giant Numa mountain formed on top of Xiao Baiyu's head. Xiao Baiyu suddenly felt as if a giant mountain was pressing down on him, and his body suddenly stagnated. Wang Xianqing and eighth sister Zhu immediately seized the opportunity. The new moon fell, and the flying fork approached him. However, a silver light suddenly appeared, and the new moon shattered. The flying fork fell, and even the giant Numa mountain in the air collapsed. However, Xiao Baiyu still took a step back, and blood slowly flowed from the corner of his mouth. This person's magical power is really unfathomable. We must not let him live. Fellow Taoists don't hold back anymore. Bailey Changtian was obviously shocked by the power of Xiao Baiyu's sword. 3 pure young Laozu's supreme magical power were broken by a single sword. The so-called one sword breaks 10,000 laws was nothing more than this. Bailey Changtian immediately joined Mu Yi Laozu's camp to end the battle quickly. In this case, let's end the battle quickly. It's finally letting him off easy. Wang Xianqing was about to rush forward, but he saw that Xiao Baiyu actually laughed again. Wang Xianqing suddenly became furious and said, What's there to laugh about when you're about to die? Do you think you're dying too slowly? Xiao Baiyu's sword broke Mu Yi Laozu's 10,000 trees forest, but he didn't expect that there was a green light hidden in it. Although he managed to destroy it, he couldn't help but spurt out a mouthful of blood again. However, he still laughed and said, Wang Xianqing, this Xiao has already said that you always talk too much nonsense. Wang Xianqing was furious, and was about to open his mouth to scold Xiao Baiyu, when he suddenly heard a long roar. A person laughed and said, Xiao Baiyu, are you dead yet? Wang Xianqing and the others all paled. The Lingyun Valley's Xiaoyaozi's expression became even more unsightly. Then they heard Xiao Baiyu laugh and say, "If you were one step late, I would turn into a ghost and burn all your feathers." The person who came shouted angrily, "You dare? Be careful, I will leave right now." Xiao Baiyu laughed and said, "If you leave, I will definitely burn all your feathers." Wahahaha. The person who came laughed exaggeratedly and said, "I heard that you invited a group of pure young cultivators to fight. I naturally have to dress up properly for such a grand event. That's why I'm slightly late." As he spoke, a streak of light directly entered the clouds from the horizon, and then he clicked his tongue and said, "Who am I seeing? Isn't this the Lingyun Valley's Xiaoyaozi? Come, let's get to know each other first. Let's see how many rays of light you've cultivated in your rainbow transformation divine ability in these 300 years. The Xiaoyaozi said coldly, "Bastard Yang, you better think clearly. Our 6 sacred lands are working together now. If you rashly interfere, aren't you afraid of the 6 sacred lands condemning you for the peacock race in the future?" The person who came was furious and cursed, "Motherfucker. If you want to fight, then fight. Why are you talking so much nonsense? I hate bullying others the most in my life." The Xiaoyaozi didn't say a word and suddenly attacked. The person who came cried out strangely and said, "Xiaoyaozi, you're so naughty. You actually plagiarized the technique of your ancestor and dared to make the first move." As he spoke, a 5-colored feather fan appeared in the person's hand, and he waved it lightly. A cluster of golden feathers in the 5-colored feather fan glowed explosively, and the Xiaoyaozi's divine ability was actually instantly dissolved into nothingness. 5 elements spiritual light fan. The Xiaoyaozi exclaimed, and the other pure yang cultivators, including Laozu and Xiao Baiyu, were stunned. Chapter 1161. Yang Shouchang was indeed a person who could not stand to bully others. Whether it was in the endless mountains, or in the process of traveling the training world of the Central Plains, there were many anecdotes of Yang Shouchang, helping others when he saw injustice, and in fact he had succeeded in doing so most of the time. However, he had never thought that he originally represented the greatest power in this part of the world. As the younger brother of the current Peacock King of the Peacock Royalty, he was a famous bastard king in the Endless Mountains. Although he was famous in the training world for not standing to bully others, 5 out of 10 times he could not tell right from wrong, or perhaps he could not be bothered to tell right from wrong, and was just doing whatever he wanted. There was even a demon race in the boundless mountain range that took advantage of this hobby of his, and specially staged a trick of bullying the weak with the strong when he passed by, so that this royal brother could have a taste of helping the weak. After the incident, the weak side was actually rewarded with a high-grade heaven-rank spirit item. The demons in the Endless Mountains went crazy. The show of bullying the weak with the strong was constantly played out in the various races of the demon race, and the Peacock King brother was never tired of it. Every time, he would reward the weak side, but this reward mostly followed the temperament of the Peacock King brother. Sometimes he would find a good treasure, making people wild with joy. Sometimes he would casually throw out a beautiful feather, making people very depressed. However, this kind of scene continued to be staged. After all, it was just a show. And if he could get the praise of the Peacock King, why not? That was until one time when the Peacock King was too excited, when he drew his sword to help, and accidentally killed the person who was using his power to bully others. The Peacock King cursed his bad luck, then waved his hand and left. Did the old man not give any rewards? This was all to make the old man happy. Could it be that the old man really could not see it? We've lost someone just to make you smile. A mid-Dharma adept, you know? All the rewards that the prince had given them could not even be compared to the life of a mid-Dharma elder. The clan wanted to cry but had no tears to shed. This was because before the prince left he had said, "Scum like him deserves to be beaten to death." You really can't tell if it's real or fake. At this time, this Peacock Royalty royal brother saw 5 pure young Laozu ganging up on a pure young Laozu. It seemed like the person being ganged up on had a little bit of friendship with him. What made the Peacock Royalty royal brother even angrier was that someone actually dared to threaten him in the name of the 6 sacred lands. He had seen a dog relying on its master's power. But when had he ever seen a dog relying on its master's power to help? Yang Wangdi was instantly enraged. When he heard that there was going to be a fight between pure young cultivators, not only did he put on his most gorgeous attire, he even stole one of the inherited treasures of the Peacock King, the 5 elements spiritual light fan, while his royal brother was doting on his concubine. It was a perfect chance for him to use it to beat that bastard. In an instant, the Xiaoyaozi had suffered greatly. No matter what remarkable power he used to fight the enemy, Yang Wangdi only needed to wave the 5 elements spiritual light fan in his hand. With Yang Wangdi's level of cultivation, that was not weaker than the Xiaoyaozi's. The power of any remarkable power that the Xiaoyaozi used would be mostly weakened by the 5 elements spiritual light fan before it could even be used. The little bit of power that was left was not even enough for Yang Wangdi to sneeze. Although the 5 elements spiritual light fan was a famous treasure in the cultivation world, it did not have an effect that was too heaven-defying. Yang Wangdi was not Xiao Baiyu. It was enough for him to suppress his old enemy, the Xiaoyaozi, to the point that he had no power to fight back. If he wanted to share the burden of another opponent for Xiao Baiyu, Yang Wangdi had always been able to fight with ease, so he would never do this kind of thing. Without the Xiaoyaozi, the pressure on Xiao Baiyu was less than before. But it should not be forgotten that Xiao Baiyu was injured when he was besieged by the 5 people. So his strength was also weakened to a certain extent. Therefore, although the Xiaoyaozi was restrained by Yang Shouchang, Wang Xianqing and the other 3 could still suppress the injured Xiao Baiyu. As for the Xiaoyaozi, it was not impossible for him to help. But no one was willing to provoke the Peacock Royalty. The Peacock Royalty was known to be the #1 demon race, whose strength was even above the green sea snake. One must know that the green sea snake family could contain the Crystal Palace in the East China Sea. So where was the strength of the Peacock Royalty? Perhaps no one knew this boundary better than the pure Sun Laozu of the 5 Holy Lands. Oh, the Xiaoyaozi, I forgot one thing. When I came here, I passed by the Magic Cloud City. It seems that it is being besieged by Mara's army. If it falls, won't the defense line formed by the Lingyun Valley and the Skyward Pavilion against the Endless Mountain lose an important fulcrum? Holding the 5 elements spiritual light fan, Yang Shouchang seemed to suddenly think of something and kindly reminded. After all, Mara is the enemy of both the human and demon races. The old man thinks that it is better for you to send a message to the Lingyun Valley as soon as possible. At this time, the Xiaoyaozi could be said to be restrained by Yang Shouchang, who was holding the 5 elements spiritual light fan. Upon hearing this, he immediately snorted and said, "It's better for your excellency to worry about this matter. The Lingyun Valley has also investigated the Mara's army in advance. With the nearly 10,000 years of operation of the Magic Cloud City, it is completely impregnable." Really? Yang Shouchang dragged his tone to express his doubt. But when I passed by, I seemed to find that there were a lot of Mara's army gathered. I only found 2 Azuras before, but who am I? Soon, I found 2 more hidden Azuras among the Mara's army. Haha, it is not easy to hide from me. Are you sure that the Magic Cloud City can cope with it? The Xiaoyaozi's expression suddenly changed. For Azuras? Wasn't there only 1 Azura in the news from the Magic Cloud City? Why did Yang Shouchang change it twice? Is this guy telling the truth or not? According to normal circumstances, the unfettered one would probably just laugh it off when faced with Yang Shouchang's rambling. Yet why did he just happen to be slightly restless now? Looking at the serious look on Yang Wangdi's face, the Xiaoyaozi couldn't tell whether the words of this unreliable younger brother of the Peacock King were true or not for a moment. When experts fought, there was no room for him to let his imagination run wild, let alone when he was being suppressed. When Yang Wangdi saw that his opponent was so easily disturbed by him, he immediately fanned the 5 elements spiritual light fan in his hand left and right. In a moment, the sage-like Xiaoyaozi's hair was disheveled and his clothes were ragged. He didn't look carefree at all. Haha, Xiaoyaozi, you don't have to worry. Haha, unfettered one, You don't have to worry about that. I'm a righteous man. How could I sit back and watch the magic cloud city be destroyed? I've already sent a message back to the endless mountain range to send reinforcements. No matter what, we have to kill Devil's army. However, if the people of the magic cloud city fail to defend the city during this process, my men will have to occupy the city first. No matter what, my men can't be destroyed by Devil Luo, can they? Yang Wangdi paused, and his expression suddenly turned solemn. He was the younger brother of the Peacock King, so he had the noble bearing and domineering bearing of the Peacock royalty to command the demon beasts of the endless mountain range. Coupled with his gorgeous clothes, he instantly looked like a king of the world. He swept the spiritual light fan in his hand and suddenly shouted, "Hey Xiaozi, take this." The unfettered one had already been suppressed by Yang Wangdi to the point of losing his temper. When he suddenly saw Yang Wangdi, who had always been frivolous, suddenly execute the divine ability with such a serious expression, he didn't have to think to know that it was surely a divine ability with an extremely formidable might. The first thing the Xiaozi wanted to do was to dodge quickly. However, it was extremely difficult for him to dodge this magical ability when he was completely suppressed. It was inevitable that he looked a little embarrassed in a hurry. However, unlike the marvelous technique in his imagination, the might of Yang Wangdi's divine ability was sufficient, but it seemed to be extremely rigid. It didn't change as the unfettered one dodged, and instead, it swept away the cloud barrier behind the unfettered one for an instant. Although it was only for a short moment, the cultivators gathered on the Qingming River didn't lack eyesight. Thus, they saw a scene that they would never forget for the rest of their lives. The majestic Yang Wangdi was like an immortal god that had descended to the world. Colorful rays of light dyed the world and swept away all the demons and monsters in the world. Unfortunately, there just happened to be such an embarrassed figure that was rolling and crawling to dodge the colorful rays of light that swept across the world, confirming his identity as a demon and monster. Just when the seventh pure Yang Laozu appeared, the cultivators hidden inside and outside the Qingming River were once again silent. It just so happened that at this moment, the cloud space only opened for a moment, and then closed again. The many cultivators on the Qingming River finally recovered from the shock, and exclaimed one after another, "What did we just see? Could the person who was beaten into a sorry state just now be the Lingyun Valley's pure Yang Senior Laozu Xiaoyaozi? How is this possible? Then who was the person who beat Senior Xiaoyaozi until he pissed his pants?" A sharp-eyed cultivator immediately exclaimed, "Isn't that person the Peacock Royalty's royal brother, Yang Shouchang?" It turned out that the gap between the two was so big. It was said that the Peacock King's younger brother was an insignificant character, but it turned out that he had such strength. The rumors were really unbelievable. He was worthy of being the Peacock King's brother. In an instant, the noise on the Qingming River became louder and louder. It was even louder than the clamor. Lu Ping quickly discovered that something was wrong. It wasn't that people were talking about it, but that something was approaching. "It's coming." Lu Ping's heart skipped a beat. He quickly turned his gaze towards the direction of the Northwest Canal that was connected to the Qingming River. At this time, many cultivators gathered on the Qingming River also quickly discovered the abnormality and turned their gazes towards the northwest. However, nothing appeared in the northwest direction. Instead, the northeast side of the sky flashed with colorful rays of light again. The cultivators' gazes were once again attracted to it. They saw 7 different colored feathered fans coming from the horizon. They once again swept away the cloud space in the sky and disappeared into it. The 8th pure Yang cultivator, Tianxian Sec's 7th fan Laozu. Chapter 1162. 7 feather fans of different colors entered the cloudy space, one after another. Everyone knew that this could only represent the one and only pure Yang Laozu in the cultivation world. And that was Tianxian Sec's pure Yang cultivator, 7 Laozu. Muyi Laozu's endless falling trees were immediately blocked by 7 Laozu. The 7 feather fans shone with different lights, and like a gale passing through, they turned Muyi Laozu's boundless forest upside down. 7 fan, how dare you come here at this time? Are you afraid that Mara's army on the sea will raid your nest? 7 Laozu was still dressed like an old farmer, and he said indifferently, "It will only take 2 days to go back and forth. I can wait." Muyi Laozu said coldly, 7 Fan, "Who do you think you are?" The illusion of the boundless forest that was destroyed without a trace suddenly rose again, as if it would never be destroyed, and once again, it drowned 7 Laozu in the boundless forest. However, 7 treasured fans suddenly rose in the sky. 1 fan blew wind, 1 fan blew fire, 1 fan blew water, 1 fan sealed ice, 1 fan blew thousands of swords to the sun, 1 fan blew endless falling trees, and 1 fan blew yellow dust. It was as if the mighty power of heaven and earth had descended. Although the boundless forest was destroyed again and again, Muyi Laozu's face became worse and worse. 7 Laozu rose expressionlessly from the endless falling trees with his hands behind his back. Muyi Laozu, who was on the opposite side, finally could not hold back anymore. With a trace of shock he said, 7 Feather Fan, you've finally refined it. 7 Laozu was still so indifferent, and he said unhurriedly, "In the end, it's just a replica. The real 7 Feather Fan can only become a real heaven-opening artifact when the 7 feathers of the real 7 Feather Fan are united. However, this is only 7 feather fans, and it can't be united at all. I didn't expect this. Many generations of Tianxian sect cultivators could only promote these 7 feather fans to a first tribulation spiritual treasure. I didn't expect you to successfully pass the second tribulation in your hands. Although the 7 fans can't be united, who dares to say that they are weaker than a pure yang spiritual treasure? Tianxian sect was once a large sect that had split from Wuxia school. The two sects were entangled with each other, and after thousands of years, they had some understanding of each other's foundation. The method of imitation of the 7 feather fan was obtained by Tianxian sect from Wuxia school. However, Wuxia school eventually gave up on refining it because they found that the feather fans could not be united. However, in order to create a supreme treasure that could suppress the sect, Tianxian sect spent thousands of years, and through the efforts of several generations of cultivators, finally gathered the 7 ice feather fan, and finally promoted it to a second tribulation spiritual treasure. Its power was even greater than that of the 5 elements spiritual light fan. Although the 5 elements spiritual light fan was a method of refining spiritual treasures passed down in the past, there was a special method to use this kind of spiritual treasure, and there were various restrictions on the cultivators. Moreover, it was just a substitute magic treasure deduced from Peng Doran's supreme magical power. In terms of power, the 5 elements spiritual light fan might be better than any feather fan. However, although the 7 feather fans could not be united, they were a set after all. When the 7 fans united, the 5 elements spiritual light fan would have to retreat. Xiaoyaozi was suppressed by Yang Shouchang, and although Muyi Laozu tried his best to resist, he was also easily held up by the 7 fans. The battle that had been besieging Xiao Baiyu turned from 5-1 to 4-1, and then to 3-1. Xiao Baiyu laughed wildly and said, "Guys, now that the offense and defense have changed, it's time for me to show you what I've learned over the years." One sword to break the sky. It was the word break that Xiao Baiyu personally carved on the stone tablet in Jiao Daren in the past. Bailey Changtian and Laozu couldn't even form a seal in front of Xiao Baiyu. Bailey Changtian's attainments in spatial magical power were extremely profound, but the flying sword in Xiao Baiyu's hand was the one that Jiao Daren used to split the sky. That heaven-breaking sword really broke the sky, so what was a mere spatial magical power? In the face of the power of splitting the sky and splitting the earth, it was only a joke. Even if Xiao Baiyu wasn't Jiao Daren, he still couldn't be controlled by Bailey Changtian's magical power. One sword to split the sky. It was the word open that Jiao Daren carved on the stone tablet. The flying fork array formed by the 36 flying forks in front of 8th sister, Zhu, could no longer take shape. 8th sister Zhu saw that the situation wasn't good, and hurriedly combined the 36 flying forks into one. But there were still 6 that broke before they could fuse. Originally a second tribulation spiritual treasure, but now it had fallen to the level of a first tribulation spiritual treasure. Without these 6 flying forks, the flying fork array could no longer take shape. Eighth Sister Zhu's face suddenly distorted, but in the face of the power of that sword, she couldn't take another step forward. One sword to bury the sky. Obtaining the word bury on the stone tablet was also the sword with the most murderous aura in Xiao Baiyu's swordsmanship. It was also the sword that made Xiao Baiyu famous when he used it to kill LV Taiqing. Among the 3 sky-opening sword moves that Xiao Baiyu comprehended, the most brilliant and vast sword move was the sky-breaking sword move, which suppressed the enemy with momentum and subdued the enemy without fighting. The most powerful one was the sky-opening sword move, which could confront head-on and could be regarded as the best swordsmanship in the cultivation world. But the sky-burying sword move was the most powerful sword move. This sword was headed straight for Wang Xianqing. Back then, LV Taiqing and the Purple Sun Palace had been provoked by Xiao Baiyu's words. In addition, they had underestimated him and didn't dodge this sword. They were confident that they could withstand it, but they never expected to be killed by Xiao Baiyu. Learning from his previous mistake, Wang Xianqing wouldn't face the attack head-on. A Grade 2 Tribulation Numinous Treasure flying sword in his hand transformed into 24 bright moons in midair. He used the second supreme sword art of the Purple Sun Palace, the full moon sword art. However, the 24 moons were destroyed one by the heaven's burial sword, and the flying sword flew away with a mournful wail. Wang Xuanqing's expression changed again, and he didn't dare to block the sword anymore. He dodged far away, and the remaining sword chi broke through the cloud space and disappeared. The flying sword returned to Wang Xuanqing's hand. The artifact spirit in it was already on the verge of death. Even if he managed to save it, the flying sword would probably drop a grade and would never be able to advance in the future unless he put it back in the furnace and reforged it again. Just as the 7 Laozu arrived above the Qingming River, the battle cries from the northwest finally approached. The cultivators on the Qingming River exclaimed one after another. Obviously, they already knew what had happened. Following a loud bang, Mara's army surged up the Qingming River along the canal. The first to bear the brunt was the Northern Alliance's treasure ship, whose sail had been cut by Xiao Baiyu. My friends in front, quickly intercept them. Join forces with our friends from Magic Cloud City, the Yuan brothers, and our Peacock royalty to kill this group of Mara's army. Far behind the Mara's army, a loud shout came from afar. This group of Mara's army was actually driven here by someone, and they didn't look very powerful. Moreover, with the 3 major forces of Magic Cloud City, the Yuan family, and the Peacock royalty involved, it seemed like it was indeed a good time to kill them. However, before the Mara's army could reach them, more than 10 beams of light suddenly shot out from the treasure ship and rushed towards the Mara's army. The cultivators from the various clans who were ready to fight immediately stopped in their tracks. What a joke! When did the Northern Alliance's treasure ship have so many Dharma adepts? And all of them were mid-Dharma adepts. Very quickly, someone recognized the origins of these people from the beams of light. Chang Sankai, Sun Liuha, and Zhu Jiuwan of the Ninexian Tower. Su Jin and Guo Wanxing of the Ziyang Palace. Mu Chongxing and Qin Wuliang of the Wuxing School. Sima Chongfeng of the Skyward Pavilion. Surprisingly, most of them were direct adepts from the 5 Holy Lands. Only 2 or 3 mid-Dharma adepts were from the Northern Alliance in the past, but now they were following Hanya Laozu. The 5 Holy Lands were very cunning. Just based on the direct adepts from these Holy Lands alone, each of them had few opponents of the same level as them. Even if the cultivators who surrounded the Northern Alliance's treasure ship this time were able to break the protective array of the treasure ship, how many of them could survive under the attack of these direct adepts from the Holy Lands? Moreover, there were still these pure young Laozu in the sky who had long hidden themselves. If not for Xiao Baiyu's appearance, all of them combined would not even be enough to fill the gaps between the teeth of a single pure young Laozu. Of course, these people did not know that the 5 Holy Lands had actually set up such a huge formation because of Xiao Baiyu. They only thought that if Xiao Baiyu's arrival had not ruined the pure young Laozu's plot and forced them to show up to stop them, these pure young Laozu would probably have killed them. Inexplicably, These cultivators who did not know the truth more or less felt grateful to Xiao Baiyu. Even if they did not feel grateful, at least their impression of Xiao Baiyu, the 7 fans Laozu, and the others was at least better than the pure young Laozu of the 5 Holy Lands. Lu Ping secretly shook his head. If they had known that the Northern Alliance female cultivator, who had previously spread the news, was just a plot by the 6 Holy Lands against Xiao Baiyu, and that the news had suddenly spread in the cultivation world, there was an 80 to 90% chance that Xiao Baiyu was the one behind it, adding fuel to the fire. Who knew what these people would think? More than 10 mid-Dharma adepts had formed a line of defense in front of the treasure ship, blocking the attack of the chased-away Mara army in one fell swoop. However, in the midst of a few explosive roars, 4 Azuras suddenly sprang out from Mara's army and rushed towards the 10 or so disciples of the Holy Lands. There were also a few Jade Mara following behind them. What? Even the disciples of the Holy Lands were shocked at this time. In the face of the attack of the Azuras, they had no choice but to dodge in a panic. They did not even have time to think about how the Magic Cloud City and the Peacock Clan cultivators would be able to drive away the Mara army with Azuras. At this moment, a ray of sword light suddenly fell from the cloudy space in the sky, after Wang Xianqing dodged the buried heaven sword technique that had defeated the full moon sword technique. It fell silently on the treasure ship that was anchored on the Qingming River and could not move. Was it Wang Xuanqing's intention, or was it Xiao Baiyu's intention? The formation shield of the Northern Alliance treasure ship, which had already been vulnerable to a single blow, suddenly shattered. The sword light went straight down, directly breaking the treasure cabin space, and a large spirit vein that was imprisoned in the treasure cabin space suddenly leaked out. All of the treasure ship's defensive measures were destroyed by the sword light, and the rich spirit chi that leaked out immediately attracted the attention of the Azuras, who were originally rushing towards the 10 or so disciples of the Holy Lands. Following closely behind them was the tens of thousands of Mara army. Chapter 1163. None of the sects would allow their heirs to fight against the Azuras, unless it was a disaster like Chengling Island. Under the attack of the 4 Azuras, the heirs of the 5 major sects immediately scattered. However, at this moment, the Northern Alliance's treasure ship was accidentally destroyed by Xiao Baiyu's sword. It was also the treasure cabin that contained at least one large spirit meridian. Dense spiritual qi immediately leaked on the surface of the Qingming River, attracting the attention of the Azuras, who were originally charging at the few air cultivators. Following closely behind them were nearly 10,000 big and small Azuras. Like moths that had discovered a light, they all swarmed toward the treasured ship. The Northern Alliance's treasure ship is finished. Lu Ping sighed softly. In reality, the treasure ship was still trying its best to resist. Although the spirit meridian in the treasure cabin had been leaked, the treasure ship could still use the spirit meridian to perform a part of its magical powers. Countless talismans that were engraved on the treasure ship that could still be used were all activated by the Northern Alliance cultivators. Many of these powerful magical powers could even kill Shui Mara, or even severely injure Yumara. However, although the treasure ship that had lost its protective formation had dealt a heavy blow to Mara's army, the remaining Mara still continued to attack the treasure ship. What are you waiting for? This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to annihilate Mara's army. Xianyan Laozu was chasing after Mara's army when he saw the formation on the Qingming River. How could he not understand what had happened here? However, he hated Mara's army for destroying Magic Cloud City. At this time, he could not care less about the 5 Holy Lands and the Northern Alliance's treasure ship. He just blindly encouraged the Dharma adepts who were watching to attack together and kill all the Mara who had broken through Magic Cloud City. Xianyan Laozu was the first to rush up and chase, after an Azura, into the treasure ship's treasure cabin. Following closely behind, Yang Jieshi, who was dressed in luxurious clothes from Peacock royalty, also entered the treasure cabin, leaving behind a brilliant light curtain. Even the peacock race was so gorgeous and flashy there. Oh no, that Hanya must be in the treasure cabin at this time. We must not let Peacock royalty and Xianyan obtain Jiao Doran's handwritten letter. Someone in the crowd let out a shout, which immediately alerted the cultivators of various sects who were watching from the Qingming River. With one person taking the lead, the crowd clamored one after another and charged toward the treasured ship to fight with the Devil Luo army. The entire treasured ship suddenly became a battlefield. Lu Tianyuan and Tian Tian were also eager to try. They said, "Junior brother Lu, why don't we go up? Maybe we can get something useful from the treasure ship. We don't need Jiao Doran's handwritten letter. The construction of our sect's treasure ship has entered a critical stage. At this moment, any item on the treasure ship can help us." At this time, Lu Ping suddenly asked, "Did you guys find out where those cultivators from the Holy Lands went?" Lu Tianyuan was stunned and said, "Did they not join in the battle against Mara's army on the treasure ship?" Lu Ping shook his head and said, "There are at least 11 or 12 cultivators from the Holy Lands. If they started to clear out Mara's army just now, it's impossible that they didn't see any of them. They must have escaped in the chaos just now. Strange, where did they go?" Tian Tian also found something wrong at this time. There really wasn't a single cultivator from the Holy Lands fighting with Mara on the Qingming River. Instead, there were many cultivators from the Northern Alliance who were originally on the treasure ship. As soon as Tian Tian finished speaking, he saw Lu Ping's expression suddenly go grim, and then he swiftly turned around and swung his hand, causing a strand of sword qi to slash behind Lu Ping's arm that was slashing down. Lu Tianyuan and Tian Tian were shocked, and they hurriedly turned around to take precautions. Yet they saw Lu Ping's seemingly material sword light was actually easily received by a middle-aged cultivator with a stiff expression with a single palm. In their state of shock, Lu Tianyuan and Tian Tian were about to execute their divine abilities, yet they were stopped by Lu Ping, who stretched out his hand from the side. Right when the two of them were puzzled, they heard Lu Ping say curiously, "Senior Long Huai, how did you come out?" Even though the stiff cultivator before them was much more exquisite than the middle-aged cultivator, with a simple and crude appearance that Lu Ping had seen all those years ago in the perished secret grounds, it was only in comparison. In the eyes of an ordinary person, it wouldn't be strange at all if this stiff cultivator was given the nickname Wooden Man. This person was none other than Long Huai's avatar that Lu Ping had seen when he entered the perished secret grounds all those years ago. At this moment, the cultivation of this avatar had obviously improved greatly compared to before, and in Lu Ping's senses, the aura of this avatar was practically similar to that of a great Dharma adept. Even though Lu Tianyuan and Tian Tian were stopped by Lu Ping, they still seemed to be slightly surprised and bewildered after they glanced at each other. Such a figure had actually soundlessly arrived behind the three of them, and if he really had malicious intent, the three of them wouldn't have been able to dodge in advance. However, based on Lu Ping's expression, it was obvious that the two of them were extremely familiar with each other, and the vigilance in their hearts slowly lowered. The Long Huai ancestor glanced expressionlessly at Lu Tianyuan and Tian Tian, who stood behind Lu Ping, and then he said, "A few days ago, the world responded to the creation of the heavens, and my main body sensed it as well. It just so happened that this body had made some breakthroughs and was able to walk out of that cage to take a look. So I followed the aura and rushed over here. I never expected that I would meet you." Lu Ping was shocked in his heart, but he still smiled and said, "In that case, Junior congratulates Senior's great improvement in cultivation." Long Huai nodded expressionlessly, and then he looked at Lu Ping and said, "You really didn't disappoint me. We haven't seen each other for a short period of over 100 years, yet you've actually grown to such an extent. The old man's judgment all those years ago really wasn't wrong. This is all thanks to the fortune of meeting Senior all those years ago, and Senior's intention to fulfill my wish." Long Huai shook his head and said, "The old man has experienced the passage of time, and there are many people that have tried to fulfill his wish. But up until now, perhaps only you are able to lend the old man a hand in the future." Lu Ping was stunned in his heart, and for a time, there were numerous questions in his heart. He instantly had guesses, but it added even more questions to his heart. However, when he thought about how Long Huai still asked for his help earlier, Lu Ping asked in a probing manner. What's the creation of the heavens you sensed, senior? Long Huai glanced at Lu Ping and said, You possess a creation of the heavens as well, and it was bestowed by the old man a few thousand years ago to a cultivator that possessed a rather natural talent in the Tao of formations that entered the parish secret area. Originally, the old man thought that he might be able to borrow the strength of the old man in the future. Unfortunately, it brought some trouble to the old man instead. I never expected that this treasure would be obtained by you in the end, and it has even fused with your soul and become one with you. Lu Tianyuan and Tian Tian were already extremely shocked since a long time ago. Never had they imagined that they'd come from the northern sea to the extreme south of the Central Territories. Originally, they only wanted to witness the scene of all the cultivators in the world fighting for a creation of the heavens. Yet never had they imagined that their junior brother would possess a creation of the heavens. Lu Ping's expression changed violently as well. He naturally knew that the creation of the heavens Long Huai spoke of was the ultimate treasure of the Void Sect that recorded the 9 great foundation formations and the divine perception carving secret technique. At the same time, that golden scale that had already transformed into the reverse scale of the Dharma idol had confirmed Long Huai's guess that the Void Sect was a pawn that Long Huai had set up all those years ago. But at the same time, it caused Lu Ping to increase his suspicions of the relationship between Long Huai and Jiao Daren from all those years ago. But when he saw that Long Huai seemed to have no intention of taking it back, Lu Ping asked, Then the creation of the heavens that senior sensed this time is the treasure in my possession? Long Huai shook his head and said, It isn't for the sake of the treasure in your possession, nor is it for the treasure in that vessel. It's for the sake of another treasure that caused all the treasures in the world to respond to it. Lu Ping's heart sank, yet he still asked, Another treasure? Long Huai said, Yes, that treasure seems to have an indescribable relationship with me. However, it only appeared for an instant at that time, and then no traces of it could be found after that. It ought to have been refined with the heart's blood by someone as soon as it took form, causing it to completely become the possession of another. If I want to find it in the future, then unless I see it in person, otherwise, even the old man's main body would probably be unable to find it. Lu Ping's heart eased up slightly when he heard this, and he said, Senior, do you know the details of that treasure? Long Huai shook his head and said, I don't. This treasure has definitely just taken form, so its might isn't sufficient, yet its potential is enormous. Moreover, it possesses an extremely important relationship with the 7th patriarch, otherwise, it wouldn't cause the world to respond to it. The sword of true spirit that had just overcome the first heavenly tribulation had only just taken form according to the Long Huai ancestor, but in the hands of Lu Ping, it was capable of annihilating the great cultivator Nanyu Laozu with a single strike. Lu Tianyuan and Chun Shi, who stood behind Lu Ping, had already been shaken by the numerous secrets that the Long Huai ancestor spoke of since a long time ago. Lu Ping composed his mind and continued asking, Senior, do you have any instructions for me? The Long Huai ancestor's stunned gaze finally moved slightly at this moment, and he looked towards the Northern Alliance's treasured vessel that had transformed into a battlefield on Azure Netherworld River. He said, The treasure on that vessel seems to be related to the old man as well. Perhaps it'll be of use to you in the future, so it's best if you obtain it. Lu Ping glanced at the treasured vessel that was in a mess, and then he glanced at the enormous phenomena that surged in the sky, and he couldn't help but reveal a slightly troubled expression. That person has left. It's actually the spatial divine ability. The Long Huai ancestor's stiff face finally revealed a rare trace of surprise. Lu Ping was slightly stunned, and he asked reflexively, Who? The person with the heaven creation relic is now tens of miles away. The old man can sense the aura of the heaven creation relic. That person is now heading north. Follow the old man. Lu Ping was slightly stunned, and he saw the Long Huai ancestor who was about to leave suddenly turn around, and a sharp murderous aura quickly shrouded the 2 people behind Lu Ping. These 2 have listened to the old man's many words. If it's useless, then the old man will deal with them. The sharp murderous aura instantly shrouded Lu Tianyuan and Tian Tian. They could feel that if there was even the slightest movement, the person in front of them would definitely kill them on the spot. Even Lu Ping might not be able to save them. Chapter 1164. Lu Tianyuan and Tian Tian seemed to be stared at by a ferocious beast in an instant. If they made the slightest movement, they would inevitably suffer a fatal blow from the Longhuai ancestor. Lu Ping hurriedly stopped in front of the two and said, "Senior, these two are from the same sect. They will never reveal what happened today." Same sect. The Longhuai ancestor seemed to ponder something, and then said, "That may not be true. The old man has seen many things in the secret plane where disciples kill each other, brothers kill each other, father and son kill each other, because of a treasure. They can't be trusted." Lu Ping's expression changed drastically. He abruptly flicked his hands, and the two little blue snakes caught the two black seeds in their mouths. However, Lu Ping seemed to be unable to withstand the force, and was forced to take a few steps back. The two black seeds in the little snake's mouths suddenly exploded, instantly absorbing all of Lu Ping's profound essence. The seeds then turned into two rapidly growing black poisonous vines. Lu Ping's eyes widened in shock. Lu Ping's eyes widened in shock, and the two black seeds suddenly exploded, instantly absorbing Lu Ping's profound essence. "Senior." The Longhuai ancestor's eyes flashed with surprise, and said, "You can actually discover and withstand the old man's attack. You really did not disappoint the old man, and even far exceeded the old man's expectations." Lu Tianyuan and Tian Tian were already frightened by the sudden exchange between the two sides. At this time, they realized that if it was not for Lu Ping's previous intervention, the two would have already been killed by the person in front of them. Looking at the two rattan swaying on the ground, it was obviously a kind of poisonous thing that grows quickly by devouring spiritual qi. Once the seeds were planted without anyone knowing, they would have already been sucked dry. Devouring poisonous vine. There really is such a poisonous thing in the cultivation world. Tian Tian exclaimed. He and Lu Tianyuan had already released their protective magic weapons almost at the same time. Just two pea-sized seeds were able to shake Lu Ping back. And this was just an incarnation. Lu Ping suppressed the shock in his heart and said, "Senior, this junior can guarantee with his life that these two senior brothers will never speak of today's matter." Ancestor Long Huai glanced at the three of them with a scrutinizing gaze. And then he said abruptly, "Fine, I'll believe you this time. But the three of you have to be clearly aware that so long as the matter today is leaked in the slightest, then I'm even able to annihilate the sects behind all of you with a flip of my hand. Don't say I didn't warn you." Lu Tianyuan and Tian Tian were both silent. At this time, the Longhuai ancestor glanced at the clouds in midair, then turned around and went around the other side of the Qingming River. From Lu Ping's point of view, it seemed like he wanted to go around the treasure ship and the 8 pure young Laozu, who were still fighting in the sky. "You come with the old man." Lu Ping looked at the two senior brothers behind him and saw that their faces were not looking good. No one would feel good when their life was threatened. Lu Ping guaranteed their safety with his life, but in their eyes, it was a kind of trampling on their dignity. Although the trampler was not Lu Ping, the two of them could not show their inner gratitude on their faces. Lu Ping understood their inner feelings. For people like Lu Tianyuan and Tian Tian, any consolation would be unnecessary. Lu Ping said, "Two senior brothers, I will go with the senior first." Now, two senior brothers might as well try to break into the treasure ship, but if there is a battle in midair, two senior brothers must not stay and retreat quickly. Tian Tian said, "You can go by yourself. Be careful, the two of us can still handle this." Lu Ping followed behind the Longhuai ancestor and went around the battlefield. With one step, he was already on the other side of the Qingming River, which made Lu Ping a little dumbfounded. At this time, there were 8 pure young Laozu fighting in the sky, and the battle on the Qingming River had also expanded to a radius of a few miles with the treasure ship as the center. The space turbulence caused by the Dharma Adepts battle made 5 people within a radius of 10 miles dare to directly use space magic to teleport. Previously, when the Longhui ancestor said that Hanya Laozu had already used space to teleport away from the treasure ship, Lu Ping was still a little surprised. However, now that he saw that the Longhui ancestor had really used space magic, how could Lu Ping not be surprised? Fortunately, although the Qingming River was wide, it was only about 10 miles. With Lu Ping's eyesight, he could clearly see the back of the Longhui ancestor. Lu Ping did not dare to use space magic. The conveyance light under his feet flashed continuously, and in just a short time, he had already reached the other side of the Qingming River. At this time, the Longhui ancestor had already walked to a forest on the shore, and it was unknown what he was thinking about. It looked like he was waiting for Lu Ping. That person should have a treasure that can be integrated into his body to strengthen his body. When the Longhui ancestor saw that Lu Ping had followed him, he suddenly said something without any rhyme or reason. Lu Ping did not react for a moment, and he opened his mouth to say, "What?" The Longhui ancestor looked at Lu Ping and said, "That person who has the heaven-opening relic should have a treasure that can temporarily strengthen his body, and there should also be a special teleportation array that has already been set up by an array master beforehand. This is a one-time teleportation array that has been passed down since ancient times, but because the cost of building such a teleportation array was too high, it gradually became extinct in the cultivation world. I did not expect to see such a teleportation array again this time. This one-time teleportation array was a type of array that could be used in the process of changing positions, so it was very important to protect the cultivator during the teleportation process. This was also the reason why it was so difficult to pass down this type of array in the cultivation world. The Longhui ancestor seemed to have seen through Lu Ping's doubts, and he continued to say, "The reason why the old man can still use space magic teleportation in this unstable state is because this clone of the old man is strong enough, and it is more like he is using teleportation magic than teleportation." Lu Ping suddenly understood. The clone of the Longhui ancestor was made from spiritual materials that were 9,000 years old, and the quality of the materials was far superior to the clone that Lu Ping had made from an 8,000-year-old willow tree, Lu Xiaoping. This clone's body could completely withstand teleportation in this kind of space turbulence, just like how Dharma adepts could use teleportation magic in the process of battle. Of course, to be able to use teleportation magic in the hands of Dharma adepts, a treasure had to at least be of the quality of a spirit-nurturing treasure. Otherwise, during the process of battle, before the treasure had even collided with the opponent's treasure, it would have been destroyed in the process of teleportation. There was no doubt that Lu Ping's physical body was strong among the same level of practitioners, but after going through the first lightning tribulation, it was only equivalent to a spirit-level treasure. It was far from the point where it could ignore the damage caused by the spatial turbulence. Lu Ping flew all the way behind the Longhui ancestor, and it was not until they were more than 200 miles away that he suddenly stopped in mid-air. "This seems a little tricky," the Longhui ancestor suddenly said. "There are quite a number of practitioners around the practitioner who is holding the heaven-opening artifact, and they seem to have high levels of training. The old man can help you hold them off, but you can handle the remaining one yourself. How about that?" Without needing Long Hui to say anything, Lu Ping's divine will had already detected the movement in the distance. There were 11 mid-Dharma adepts gathered around a late Dharma adept, and it was obvious that they were the 11 direct adepts from the 5 holy lands. Lu Ping hesitated for a moment and said, "Senior, what you mean is that you want me to hold that late Dharma adept back, and after you've taken care of the direct adepts from the Holy Lands, you and I will join forces to deal with Hanya Laozu." From Lu Ping's point of view, this clone of the Longhui ancestor might be very powerful, but he was ultimately only at the late Dharma stage. The direct adepts from the Holy Lands were all amazing figures, and although they were only at the mid-Dharma stage, with 11 of them working together, they could probably handle 3 or 4 great Dharma adepts, let alone 1 great Dharma adept. The Longhui ancestor alone might not be a match for them. Or could it be that after Lu Ping dealt with Hanya, he would return to help Long Huai. However, no matter which method it was, in Lu Ping's opinion, Hanya Laozu had been able to become one of the 3 leaves of the Northern Alliance, and had made a name for himself in the East Sea training world for hundreds of years. How could he be so easy to deal with? Previously, when Lu Ping had killed Nanyu Laozu, he had caught him off guard, and he had the sword of the real spirit in his hand. Now, how would Lu Ping dare to show the sword of the real spirit in front of the Longhuai ancestor? The Longhuai ancestor stared at Lu Ping for a moment, then suddenly said, "With your current strength, if you can't even handle a great Dharma adept, I'm afraid you won't be of much help to the old man in the future. Don't even think about leaving this world. If you're only willing to be a famous master in this world, and turn into dust after 1,000 years, you can leave now." Lu Ping raised his eyebrows, a sense of pride in his heart. He opened his mouth and said, "In that case, Senior, you're confident that you can withstand the joint attack of 11 mid-Dharma adepts, the strongest in the training world. They don't have to defeat you. They only need a few of them to hold you back. Once the remaining 2 or 3 of them intervene in the battle between me and Hanya Laozu, what I've planned today will not be successful, and my identity will be exposed. Moreover, I have a sect behind me. I'm sure Senior knows a thing or two about the power of the 5 holy lands. If they come to North Sea to denounce me, Jinling will definitely be destroyed." The Longhuai ancestor said coldly, "You don't have to worry about this. If the old man says he can stop them, then he can definitely stop them." As he spoke, Lu Ping saw the Longhuai ancestor suddenly reach out and pull at his abdomen. A door immediately opened, and 7 or 8 little people jumped out from it, each about half a foot to a foot tall. Their features were somewhat similar to the Longhuai ancestor. Lu Ping was shocked. These 7 or 8 little people were all clones, and each of them had a level of practice at the early Dharma stage. Some of them were about the same size as Lu Xiaoping, but their strength was much stronger than Lu Xiaoping's. This was not to say that Lu Xiaoping was inferior to these clones, but rather that Lu Ping's level of practice was far lower than the Longhuai ancestors. So many. Even though Lu Ping had seen many treasures in the cultivation world, he still couldn't help but exclaim when he saw so many avatars in front of him. Chapter 1165. However, this was not the end. The arms and legs of the Longhuai ancestor opened up again, and 7 or 8 little people of different sizes jumped out. After that, they even lifted up their own skulls, and pulled out a little person from inside, before putting their skulls back in place. Lu Ping swallowed a mouthful of saliva and asked hoarsely, "Senior, can you use all these avatars? What do you think?" This time, the Longhuai ancestor asked Lu Ping in a very human way, as if he was a little proud of Lu Ping's surprise. The 15 little people jumped around the Longhuai ancestor, making different movements, but they were very skilled, and Lu Ping could also see that these little people knew how to cooperate with each other. This was actually a Tao soldier formation, formed by avatars at the early Dharma stage. This avatar of the old man is refined from 9,000 years old withered bamboo, and its body has its own space. This Tao soldier formation was created by the old man to kill time in these tens of thousands of years after his awakening. As for the materials needed to refine this Tao soldier formation, you must have seen them in the secret area. Lu Ping had naturally seen them before. The trees in the forest were all more than 5,000 years old, and the withered trees had probably been refined by the Longhuai ancestor into avatars, forming the Tao soldier formation in front of him now. Do you think the old man can take down those 11 minor repairs at the mid-Dharma stage? The Longhuai ancestor actually asked Lu Ping this question. At this time, Lu Ping realized that the Longhuai ancestor had returned to the kind of kindness Lu Ping had shown when they first met in the secret area. The decisive way he had killed Lu Tianyuan and Tian Tian was more like a way of protecting himself. Mid-Dharma stage, and minor repairs at that. Perhaps only this old monster in front of him, who had lived for God knows how many years, could say this. Lu Ping cursed inwardly. Then he said, "Senior, I don't think there's any need for you to bring me here. With this Tao soldier formation, You can easily take down Forefather Frost Leaf along with him." The Longhua ancestor chuckled and said, "If the old man hadn't met you here, he would naturally do that. But now consider this a test from the old man. There is one thing that the old man needs to tell you. Don't expect the old man to help you after he has taken down those 11 minor repairs. If you are killed by Hanya, the old man will avenge you. If you run away now, you and I will have nothing to do with each other in the future. But if you kill that Hanya, the heaven-opening relic on him will belong to you." Lu Ping pursed his lips and said, "Why? Didn't you want to recover the heaven-opening relic, Jiao Doran's handwritten letter?" The Longhua ancestor smiled and said, "That was originally abandoned by the old man. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't want it to fall into the hands of the 6 holy lands, why would he want to recover it?" In the forest, Hanya Laozu and the 11 cultivators from the Holy Lands flew all the way. They had expected Xiao Baiyu's strength when he appeared, predicted that Xiao Baiyu might cause damage to the ship, and even predicted that Xiao Baiyu might have a helper. However, they had predicted all the possible accidents, but they still failed in the situation they had expected. Everyone knew that Xiao Baiyu was strong enough, but they still underestimated his strength. As the peak existence in the cultivation world, Xiao Baiyu could fight against 3 people and still have the upper hand. He even had the time to make the fatal sword strike that destroyed the ship. They clearly knew where the opponent's strongest move was. But in the end, they still lost because of this strongest move. This was the philosophy that sword cultivators upheld. Regardless of the level of cultivation, the depth of strength, or the conspiracies, they would only need one sword strike to destroy them. As the saying went, one sword strike to destroy all techniques. The 10,000 techniques didn't just refer to spells. It also referred to trickery, tricks, and complete suppression of strength. Therefore, even when Mara's army arrived, even when the 4 Azuras appeared, they could have resisted them. However, it was that sword strike that fell from the sky that destroyed the treasure cabin of the ship, destroying the ship's main defense and attack methods. This caused the treasure ship that even pure young cultivators had to retreat to become a fish on the chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. They could only escape because if they were too slow, they would not only face the ferocious Mara's army, but also the cunning cultivators who followed closely behind. This was originally a mission used by the 5 sacred grounds to test the air cultivators. Apart from killing Xiao Baiyu, the 5 pure young cultivators Laozu had to worry about it. All the other difficulties had to be dealt with by themselves. This was also the reason why none of the great cultivators from the 5 sects took action. They were full of confidence. They originally thought that the most difficult person to deal with was Lu Tianping of the North Sea, who came out of nowhere. This person really made them nervous for a while. It seemed that 3 or 4 of them didn't gain any advantage from him. However, this was only because the air cultivators of each sect valued their identity. Once they were forced to join forces and attack, 3 Lu Tianping could only flee. Fortunately, this person seemed to have a keen sense of smell. He quickly realized that something was wrong and hid himself first. Everyone said that this person was tactful, but in their hearts, they regretted that they couldn't compete with this person. It was really boring. However, it was that sword again that made all their efforts in vain. The treasure ship could no longer be escorted to Wuxia School. They could only retreat and escort Hanya Laozu back to Wuxia School. At least, they would have the opportunity to study Jiao Doran's handwriting. These people couldn't help but be angry. Even if it was pure young Laozu, there was still such a big gap between them and him. Even if 2 pure young cultivators, who were obviously here to help Xiao Baiyu, joined the battle, Xiao Baiyu was at least fighting 1 against 3 at this time. How could he be defeated by Xiao Baiyu's sword? If those people above them were not Laozu's pure young cultivators of each sect, perhaps these proud and arrogant air cultivators who dared to despise everything would have cursed them with words like trash, idiot, and idiot. A treasured ship had been destroyed just like that. They weren't ordinary cultivators of the Midlands. They were the elites of the hallowed grounds of the Midlands. So they naturally knew the value of a treasured ship. A treasured ship was practically the second foundation of every single large sect in the oceanic continent, and obtaining a treasured ship was equivalent to obtaining half of the resources of a large sect. Even the 5 great hallowed grounds hadn't reached the point of disregarding a treasured ship to the point that it was dispensable. Although they had failed half of the task, they didn't think the responsibility should fall on them. If so, who would fall on? Pure young Laozu. Who would dare to hold them responsible? The group of 12 people hurried on with their own thoughts, and the atmosphere was very depressing. At this moment, Hanya Laozu suddenly gasped, startling the other 11 people, and causing them to glare at him angrily. But then their hearts sank when they saw Hanya Laozu's surprised and doubtful expression. They all used their divine thoughts and various secret techniques to investigate, but still found nothing. Everyone was instantly annoyed, but they forgot that the person in front of them was a level higher than them. And he was an old great cultivator, who had been in the late Dharma stage for 200 to 300 years. Finally, it was Mu Chongxing from Wuxia School who asked, "Uncle Master, did you find something wrong?" This was the first time that Mu Chongxing had addressed Hanya Laozu as Uncle Master, in front of the other 4 Holy Lands heirs, finally confirming that Hanya Laozu was from Wuxia School. Hanya grunted, but his eyes were still looking around, as if he was not in a hurry to answer Mu Chongxing's question. Just as everyone was getting impatient, Hanya finally said, "Don't you think that the forest under our feet is a little off?" "What's off?" The one who spoke was Zhu Jiuwan from Jiushuan Tower. She was not one of the 9 leaders of Jiushuan Tower, but because of her name, people often thought of her as the 9th leader of Jiushuan Tower. In fact, the 9th leader of Jiushuan Tower was called Zhang Jiugong, and Zhu Jiuwan was only the 11th heir of Jiushuan Tower. This time, she was sent to participate in this test entirely because of her grandaunt, Zhu 8th sister. It was also because of the affection of Jiushuan Tower's most temperamental pure yang, Laozu, that although Zhu Jiuwan was not one of the 9 leaders of Jiushuan Tower, her words were often more forceful than the 9 leaders of Jiushuan Tower. Hanya Laozu obviously had some understanding of Zhu Jiuwan. Hearing her question, he did not show the slightest dissatisfaction. Instead, he explained, "It's spirituality. This forest seems to be too lush. There seems to be a hidden rhythm in the swaying branches and leaves." The 11 people looked at each other. They could not understand Hanya Laozu's intuition, which was cultivated outside of divine sense. This was an instinctive perception of danger cultivated by a great cultivator, who had experienced 1,000 years of cultivation and hundreds of years of undercover life. It was far from what these cultivators, who had cultivated for the longest time, could understand. However, there was no need for them to understand very soon. In the next moment, the forest under their feet suddenly changed. They really came to life in an instant. The endless trees began to grow wildly, and countless branches and vines wrapped around everyone's bodies. Then, they were all cut off, but they came again and again in an endless stream. The moment the entire forest came to life, the instinct honed by life and death made Hanya Laozu jump out of the encirclement of the forest. At the same time, he shouted wildly, "Run, run up!" However, in the end, he was the only one who escaped. The 16 towering trees that suddenly grew wildly in the surroundings intertwined with each other in the air, forming a huge cage under Hanya Laozu's feet, trapping the 11 direct disciples of the 5 holy lands within. Hanya Laozu was shocked, but he did not panic. He hugged the air with both hands, and a white light suddenly condensed in them. Hanya Laozu pressed the light ball down. Layers of frost immediately moistened the branches and vines, invading the huge tree cage. The infected leaves and vines would shatter into countless ice shards with just a light knock. However, a green light full of vitality suddenly rose from the bottom of the giant tree cage. The originally frozen branches and leaves suddenly revived, glowing with vitality. Under the breeze they rustled, as if laughing at Hanya Laozu. Chapter 1166. How could Hanya Laozu not know that he had encountered a formidable foe? He quickly retreated. At this point, he was very close to the trap set by his opponent, who had yet to reveal himself. Who knew if his opponent had other tricks up his sleeve to trap him as well? Flying backwards, he could only save the others if he could protect himself. Furthermore, Hanya Laozu had absolute confidence in his own abilities. As long as he escaped, it would be the greatest hindrance to his opponent, who had trapped the direct disciple of the Holy Land. However, Hanya Laozu was wrong again. Just as he flew backwards, a pair of flying swords descended from the sky. They were as mighty as a raging river, and as dangerous as the Milky Way. They headed straight for Hanya Laozu. The Great River Flows East technique was originally the most powerful sword technique. However, after Lu Ping had traveled the entire Yulon River region, it had rarely been used by Lu Ping to fight against an opponent. This was because Lu Ping had already established a complete inheritance system for this sword technique. Lu Ping had even greater ambitions regarding this. He wanted to establish a complete inheritance system for this sword technique. For this reason, after he left the South China Sea, he had come to the southern part of the Central Plains. He wanted to experience the process of how the largest river in the Central Plains, the Qingming River, flowed like the sea. Although this sword technique had not been fully established, at least its power was far greater than that of the Great River Flows East technique that had been established in the inheritance system for the 100 Rivers Flow into the Sea technique. Mid-Dharma stage. A look of disdain flashed across Hanya Laozu's face. With a flick of his wrist, a gust of cold wind blew past. The waves of swords instantly froze into spiritual chi ice crystals in mid-air, leaving only a thin stream of swords clattering in mid-air. They broke through the ice that had almost frozen the space around them, but they did not have much energy left to attack a Dharma adept. A yellow glow appeared around Hanya Laozu's body. Then in the blink of an eye, the yellow glow condensed into a piece of armor on his left shoulder. Then with a piercing sound, a dark blue sword actually pierced through the armor, but in the end, it did not hurt Hanya Laozu's body. A look of surprise also flashed across Hanya Laozu's face. He had been overseas for close to 1,000 years, and he was a great adept whose name was known throughout the overseas practice world. How could he not have heard of the famous shapeless sword technique? Naturally, he also knew that in the last 100 years, a third-generation adept, who had risen to prominence in the North Sea, had inherited the sword techniques of the North Sea's only large sect, the Fei Ling sect. The yellow armor quickly spiraled forward, restraining the shapeless water sword. This caused the flying sword to constantly shift between being tangible and intangible, but it could not break free. North Sea Lu Tianping? Hanya Laozu smiled slightly and said softly, I never thought that Senior Han Yi would actually recognize this junior. A space door formed in the aftermath of the battle between the two sides. Lu Ping took a step forward and stood dozens of feet in front of Hanya Laozu. Hanya Laozu said in surprise, What a tough body. Lu Ping also smiled faintly and said, Senior overpraises me. Saying so, he stretched out his hand and beckoned. The shapeless water sword that Hanya Laozu had used the yellow transformative armor to restrain suddenly broke free from the armor's shackles. Then, Lu Ping withdrew his outstretched hand. As for where the shapeless sword had gone, perhaps no one but Lu Ping knew. Hanya Laozu's expression suddenly became a bit more dignified. He then said, You also came to look for the heaven-opening relic, but you'd better listen to the old man's advice. This thing is not something you can touch, and it's not something that the Jinling behind you can keep. Hanya Laozu looked at the 11 Holy Land's direct descendants who were still trapped in the giant tree cage not far away. He couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. In the cultivation world these years, the North Sea Jinling has been widely spread. It is very likely that it is the first large sect after the destruction of Fei Ling sect. Seeing it today, it really is extraordinary. The 11 Holy Land's direct descendants are unexpectedly trapped inside without any movement. This kind of method is indeed worthy of praise from the old man. But are you prepared to face the anger of the 5 Holy Lands? The thin water-flowing sword stood up behind Lu Ping like a folding fan, and then suddenly opened to both sides, forming a semicircular sword fan. Lu Ping said with a smile, As long as they don't know who did it. Hanya Laozu sneered and said, What a joke. Do you know that the old man has a treasure that the Broken Water branch of Wuxia School must have? Wuxia School has been planning for this for thousands of years, so how can they not have a backup plan? What happened on Qingming River has now been reported to the 5 Holy Lands. In only 2 hours, the great practitioners of the 5 holy lands, will be able to come to the nearest place through the transmitting formation. It is still unknown whether you are a match for the old man. Do you really think you can take down the old man in 2 hours? Lu Ping chuckled, but Hanya Laozu let out a cold snort. Suddenly, a set of ice armor appeared behind him, and with a crisp clang, the netherwater sword was blocked again. However, the water nether sword was a spirit treasure that had survived 1 lightning tribulation. Although Patriarch Coldleaf's ice divine abilities had sensed something amiss when the water nether sword had approached, and he had activated a defensive divine ability in time, the water nether sword had still managed to break through the layer of ice, inch by inch, and stab toward him. Hanya Laozu smiled coldly, and the ice behind him suddenly began to thicken. Although the netherwater sword was still trying to stab forward, the speed at which the ice armor was condensing was obviously faster than the netherwater sword's stab. You overestimate yourself. 2 crystal balls of mist condensed in Hanya Laozu's hands again, and he actually threw them towards Lu Ping. At this time, Lu Ping saw that Hanya Laozu was actually wearing a pair of magnificent purple jade bracelets. They were actually one-on-one tribulation spiritual treasures, and the pair of jade bracelets were like thin water-flowing swords. When the 2 treasures were combined, their power was clearly far beyond that of ordinary tribulation spiritual treasures. However, the pair of purple jade bracelets in Hanya Laozu's hands were clearly treasures that he had refined for many years, and their foundation was not something that the thin water-flowing swords that had just gone through 1 thunder tribulation for less than 20 years could compare to. The 1,296 fan blades behind Lu Ping suddenly shot out 2 sword lights, piercing into the 2 balls of cold white mist. However, the result caused Lu Ping to frown slightly. The moment the 2 sword lights pierced into the mist, they were frozen into 2 crystal quintessential essence longswords. Even quintessential essence sword chi could be frozen. Moreover, the moment the sword lights pierced into the mist, the 2 balls of mist instantly followed the sword lights. And the moment the sword lights were frozen, they also converged their own cold chi into the sword lights. Impressively, there were 2 ice-flying swords that were exactly the same as the thin water-flowing swords. The ice-flying swords did not stop. Instead, they became even more ferocious. 2 more sword lights shot out from behind Lu Ping, but only 2 dang-dang sounds were heard, and the 2 ice-flying swords collided with the 2 ice-flying swords. Lu Ping's fingers moved, and 16 sword lights shot out, colliding with the 2 ice-flying swords. Suddenly, he saw Hanya Laozu shake his hand, and the pair of jade bracelets that were originally worn on his wrists, 1 above and 1 below, flew towards Lu Ping's head and soles. The 2 began to expand in midair, and when they reached Lu Ping's head and feet, they just happened to echo up and down, forming an ice cage, trapping Lu Ping in it. Before the cage was formed, Lu Ping already felt that his surroundings were becoming stiff, and even the void around him seemed to have become angular because of the freezing, making it more difficult for Lu Ping to move. Finally, the upper and lower jade bracelets corresponded, and the ice cage suddenly formed. Lu Ping rushed left and right in it, and the sword light fan behind him shot out as much as possible. Although it delayed the freezing of the ice cage, it was still unable to completely break it. 2 rays of light shot out from Hanya Laozu's hands, and the speed at which the cage condensed suddenly increased. He smiled and said, "Although you have some strength, and even the old man has to use some strength, but in the end, your cultivation is still not enough." The ice cage finally formed, and a huge column of ice completely sealed Lu Ping inside, gradually wearing down Lu Ping's jinqi, turning him into a frozen corpse. Then, Hanya Laozu waited for his eyes to open. This was because the frozen Lu Ping had disappeared in front of his eyes. There was not the slightest flow of jinqi, and there was no turbulence in the space. He just disappeared so abruptly. Hanya Laozu's eyes narrowed. This was not Lu Ping's real body, but an illusion condensed from a splash of water. Moreover, it was an illusion at the level of a great magical power. Even Hanya Laozu had not discovered when Lu Ping had used a magical power to escape from the ice cage. The art of crossing the sea of deception. The body of Lu Ping's illusion was originally formed from water. After being completely frozen in the ice cage, the illusion broke by itself and naturally became a piece of ice, the same ice as the ice cage. Therefore, in the eyes of Hanya Laozu, Lu Ping naturally disappeared in such a strange way. Hanya Laozu instantly understood what was going on, but Lu Ping had already attacked from behind again. The huge waves surged, but it was not as courageous as before. Instead, it was more like he was unwilling to give up day and night, and dripping water could wear away a stone. However, in an instant, Hanya Laozu felt the power of this magical power that Lu Ping had used Junqi to attract the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. This was a supreme magical power that looked so ordinary. He could not take it head-on. Hanya Laozu suddenly rose into the air. The huge waves whistled past under his feet, pouncing on the forest below Hanya Laozu's feet. It could not even destroy a single tree in the forest. However, in Hanya Laozu's heart, a cold air that was even colder than his ice Junqi rose. After the huge waves formed by Junqi swept past, the lush green leaves of the forest began to turn yellow and wither. Closely after, the leaves were sucked dry of water, and the young seedlings and short grass on the ground began to wither and wither. The sounds of insects and birds in the forest suddenly became silent. Accompanied by the rustling of leaves, there was the sound of heavy objects falling from time to time. It seemed that the birds on the trees had lost their lives. Hanya Laozu sucked in a breath of cold air. What a strange and tyrannical supreme magical power. The supreme magical power of life, the art of changing seas into mulberry fields. Chapter 1167. The art of changing seas and mulberry fields. For a moment, everything within the range of Lu Ping's theurgy withered. This kind of theurgy was even more terrifying than the number one would attribute theurgy, the fallen petals in profusion, which could reduce a cultivator's vitality and lifespan. This person must not be left alive. Patriarch Frigid Leaf's heart skipped a beat as the thought flashed through his mind. After this thought flashed through his mind, Hanya Laozu also became unstoppable. He stretched out his hand, and the pair of jade bracelets immediately appeared on his wrist. Then, he saw Hanya Laozu's hand suddenly pressing down, and he suddenly shouted, "1,000 miles of ice!" The desolate scenery that had been turned lifeless by Lu Ping's art of changing seas and mulberry fields for several miles was suddenly covered with a layer of white fog, frost, and ice crystals. It suddenly turned into a world of ice and snow. The world was still desolate, but there was a huge whirlpool that suddenly opened its mouth, wanting to devour this world of ice and snow and grind it into pieces. Hanya Laozu looked over. It was not a natural disaster, but a sword art whirlpool. Although Hanya Laozu was not a sword cultivator, he was not unfamiliar with sword cultivators. He could clearly feel that this huge sword art whirlpool had a feeling of returning to the origin for any sword theurgy. If the opponent was also a sword cultivator and used a sword theurgy to fight against him, then the opponent's theurgy would inevitably collapse and automatically fuse in front of Lu Ping's sword art whirlpool. However, if the opponent was not a sword cultivator, then this sword art whirlpool was a theurgy that could destroy everything. When a cultivator faced this theurgy, they would either use their own theurgy to defeat him, or be completely grinded to pieces by this theurgy. Facing Hanya Laozu's supreme theurgy, Lu Ping chose to face it head-on. In fact, after the opponent dodged his art of changing seas and mulberry fields, Lu Ping had already set up this Sea of 100 Rivers sword art. It was originally a backup for a series of attacks. However, with Hanya Laozu's profound cultivation, he actually reacted so quickly in such a short time. Helpless, Lu Ping had no choice but to release the arrow on the bow. Creak, creak, creak. If Hanya Laozu wanted to freeze Lu Ping, he would first have to freeze this sword theurgy. If Lu Ping wanted to trap Hanya Laozu in the Sea of 100 Rivers sword art, he would first have to grind the ice and snow apart. For a moment, the two theurgy were actually locked in a stalemate in mid-air. Lu Ping was still holding on, but the shock in Hanya Laozu's heart had reached another level. His level of cultivation was far above Lu Ping's, and the quality of the pair of purple jade bracelets in his hands was slightly higher than the thin water-flowing sword. Moreover, the peerless theurgy of the 1,000 miles of ice was also one of the most famous secret techniques in the world of cultivation. However, at this moment, he was in a stalemate with a third-generation adept at the mid-Dharma stage. What a strong true essence! What a brilliant swordsmanship! What a powerful supreme divine ability! Amidst the loud crash, Hanya Laozu's frozen world was instantly shattered, and Lu Ping's Sea of 100 Rivers sword art also came to an end. This time, the direct confrontation between the two of them was actually a stalemate. Hanya Laozu's expression of disbelief could not help but become more cautious, while Lu Ping, on the other hand, gained a little more confidence. Just as the peerless theurgy of the two of them broke apart, a few rays of sword light suddenly pierced through the ice and sword aura that filled the sky, heading straight for Hanya Laozu. At the same time, Hanya Laozu also threw out a few icicles towards Lu Ping. Pitter-patter. The two of them were fighting for an opportunity to kill each other quickly, but neither of them could do anything to the other. Hanya Laozu formed a seal with his hand, then struck it in the direction of Lu Ping. What followed was a loud crash, and the entire ground shook. The ground that was originally covered in silver shattered once again, and boundless ice and snow flew in all directions, turning the area that was previously enveloped by the 1,000 miles of ice into a slaughterhouse. Great Snow Avalanche, the second peerless theurgy of the ice and snow secret technique. Although this place was not a snowy mountain or glacier where avalanches would occur easily, the space that was previously enveloped by the 1,000 miles of ice was completely suitable for the Great Snow Avalanche. The 1,000 miles of ice and the Great Snow Avalanche were two peerless theurgy secret techniques that were extremely closely linked. Cultivators who had cultivated the 1,000 miles of ice would usually have to cultivate the Great Snow Avalanche as well. Only by combining the two peerless theurgy would they be able to unleash an even stronger might. Jinling's Tian Shui Laozu had advanced to the mid-Dharma stage many years ago, and he had cultivated the 1,000 miles of ice, a peerless theurgy. It was a pity that he did not manage to cultivate the Great Snow Avalanche after that. However, Tian Shui Laozu and Tianfan Laozu had cultivated Jinling's secret combination attack technique. In addition to Tianfan Laozu's successful cultivation of the peerless theurgy secret technique, Whirlwind Scattered Clouds, the two of them combined to form a set of peerless theurgy that complemented each other's powers, the Snow-Torturing Wind Glutton. This became the method that the two of them, who were at the mid-Dharma stage, used to fight against late Dharma stage adepts. Hanya Laozu's abilities were obviously far above Tian Shui Laozu's. To be able to use these two peerless theurgy consecutively so easily, Hanya Laozu was confident that even if Lu Ping was a cultivator of the same level as him, he would not be able to handle it in a short period of time. Hanya Laozu's continuous use of these two peerless theurgy consecutively was also because he had accurately calculated that Lu Ping's inner yuan might not be able to gather together in a short period of time. This had become an opportunity for Hanya Laozu to defeat Lu Ping. Opportunity? If it was before he met Lu Ping, Hanya Laozu would never have thought that he would need to look for an opportunity to defeat a middle Dharma stage cultivator. Although the world of ice and snow had blocked Hanya Laozu's vision, it did not affect Hanya Laozu's detection. However, just as Hanya Laozu's divine will had entered this chaotic world, he was prepared to see Lu Ping scrambling to deal with the tyrannical Shintang's suppression in front of him and take the opportunity to kill him. Just as he was about to take the opportunity to kill him, Hanya Laozu's expression suddenly changed. It was still that sparkling white world, but inside it, there was a similarly sparkling and tranquil place. No matter how violently Hanya Laozu's ice and snow wreaked havoc, it was unable to break this tranquil place in the middle. A huge white jade lotus bloomed, and countless runes flowed on the huge lotus petals. In the land of ice and snow, everything within a radius of several feet was completely suppressed by the lotus formation. Lu Ping stood in the middle of the flower, above the formation. He slowly raised both his hands, and the huge lotus formation began to rise slowly. Wherever it passed, all the ice and snow disappeared. Hanya Laozu's body quickly moved away, but he suddenly saw that the sky around him had suddenly been arranged with 12 huge stars. Hanya Laozu only felt that no matter which direction he wanted to go, he would suddenly bump into one of the stars, and he would immediately be surrounded by the other 11 stars. Hanya Laozu calmed himself down. He knew that this was probably a trick that his opponent had set up a long time ago. However, he did not understand why Lu Tianping did not summon this magic power at the beginning. Instead, he only summoned this formation after fighting with him for a long time. In fact, this reason was very simple in Lu Ping's eyes. It was because he wanted to give it a try. He wanted to test the true gap between himself and a veteran great cultivator. Now that he had an idea in his heart, Lu Ping naturally summoned the tricks that he had set up earlier one by one and let loose. The 2 purple jade bracelets on Hanya Laozu's wrists were thrown out again. One of them stood under his feet, and the other hovered above his head. A faint ice wall appeared around Hanya Laozu. This ice wall was not a defensive method set up with ice, but it actually completely froze the surrounding space. The world of ice and snow suddenly shattered, and a huge lotus slowly rose up. Lu Ping stood on the formation, and the 12 pearls hanging in the sky resonated with each other. It was as if the entire world was under Lu Ping's control. Spirit restriction. The Lingqi around Hanya Laozu completely dissipated, and there was no longer any Lingqi floating around Hanya Laozu. Suppressing mountain. Hanya Laozu felt the space around him start to compress inexplicably. The protective ice wall that he had set up using his spatial ability immediately started to creak and crack. Hanya Laozu's expression changed slightly, and he suddenly heard Lu Ping shout, "Striking God!" The 12 stars that were hanging in the sky instantly appeared around Hanya Laozu like meteors. The ice wall that was already unable to withstand the heavy load was instantly smashed through with a loud rumble. The 2 purple jade bracelets on his head and feet resonated with each other, and a profound ice pillar directly sealed Hanya Laozu within it. Amidst a series of densely packed smashing sounds, the light on the 2 purple jade bracelets trembled violently, becoming increasingly dim. Lu Ping stretched out his hand and clenched his fist, treading. Each gentian bead brought about a violent wave, and the natal gentian formation became more and more violent. The purple jade bracelets suddenly began to shake. Under the fierce attack of the natal gentian formation, the surface of the 2 first tribulation spirit treasures even began to crack. However, Hanya Laozu just frowned and remained indifferent. Seeing that the 2 jade bracelets were about to completely shatter, the spirit hidden in the original body let out a panicked tremble. Hanya Laozu suddenly opened his eyes, and the 2 jade bracelets on his head immediately returned to Hanya Laozu's body. The resistance of the gentian formation suddenly disappeared, and the 12 gentian beads suddenly rushed toward Hanya Laozu like a tsunami. However, a purple jade ring suddenly rose from the top of Hanya Laozu's head. A dense purple aura suddenly burst out from the jade ring, and the 12 gentian beads that came from all directions, along with the violent wave of spiritual energy, were all frozen in midair. Purple jade ice essence. A second tribulation spirit treasure. Another 1,000 miles of ice. With the help of this second tribulation spirit treasure, refined from the purple jade ice essence, Hanya Laozu completely froze the gentian formation in one fell swoop. The whole formation suddenly began to tremble violently. This was Lu Ping trying his best to get the 12 gentian beads out of the ice. However, Hanya Laozu would not give Lu Ping this chance again. The jade ring made from the purple jade ice essence floated above his head, and Hanya Laozu went straight to Lu Ping in the lotus formation. Hanya Laozu wanted to use this second tribulation spirit treasure to completely kill the minor repairs in front of him, who had brought him so much trouble. Clang! Unknowingly, a praying mantis lay on Lu Ping's shoulder, and the 2 big blades in front of it crisscrossed. Clang! There was a sound of gold and iron colliding. Hanya Laozu screamed in disbelief. His body with the jade ring on his head did not advance but retreated. 2 huge rays of light crisscrossed over the top of Hanya Laozu's head. The solid purple aura that diffused from the purple jade ring was cut off by the intersecting rays of light. Chapter 1168. The Northern Alliance was the most powerful sect in the East Sea apart from the Crystal Palace. However, when it came to the history of sects, the Northern Alliance had the shortest history apart from the Carefree sect, which had just become a large sect. Even so, the Northern Alliance had only accumulated 3 Second Tribulation spiritual treasures in the past thousands of years. They were in the hands of Gui Yi, Chu Yi, and Hanya respectively. When Hanya first joined the Northern Alliance, his initial goal was to obtain the spiritual treasure having. However, the spiritual treasure having had always been a very special existence in the Northern Alliance. In the end, it fell into the hands of Chu Yi Laozu, who had more experience in the Northern Alliance. Hanya and Chu Yi were originally estranged because of Gui Yi Laozu. After that, Hanya tried every possible way to transfer the spiritual treasure having from Chu Yi Laozu to himself. Because of this, the two of them even had a huge argument. In the end, Patriarch Crimson Leaf had no choice but to gather a large amount of the Northern Alliance's power. They found the purple jade ice essence, a treasure of heaven and earth, in the Northern Icefield's 10,000-year frigid ice spirit treasure. With that, the Northern Alliance's ice spirit treasure passed through the Second Thunder Tribulation and became a Second Tribulation spirit treasure. Hanya Laozu no longer had any reason to cause trouble for Chu Yi Laozu because of the spiritual treasure. However, Chu Yi Laozu, who was naturally suspicious, had some bad associations because of this. This originally narrow hostility, in the end, caused Chu Yi Laozu to be suspicious of Hanya Laozu. Secretly, he got closer to the truth. Hanya Laozu seemed to have frequent contact with people outside of the Northern Alliance. Unfortunately, Chu Yi Laozu did not have a strong background like Hanya Laozu. The two of them had similar status in the Northern Alliance, and their strength was also similar. If Chu Yi Laozu wanted to move to Hanya Laozu, there were only 2 ways. One was to obtain the support of the most representative of the Northern Alliance, Gui Yi Laozu. Gui Yi Laozu was Hanya Laozu's cultivation partner. The second way was for Chu Yi Laozu to control the evidence of Hanya Laozu's betrayal of the Northern Alliance. Therefore, Chu Yi Laozu could only wait patiently until everything was ready. However, Hanya Laozu did not need to do this. Just when Hanya Laozu felt that he was suspected by Chu Yi Laozu, the power behind him could immediately use Mara's army to kill Chu Yi Laozu in Phantom City. The spiritual treasure is broken in 2. How could it be in your hands? Forefather Cold Leaf couldn't care less about the spirit treasure above him, which had lost some of its essence in the first exchange. After dodging the scissors, he shouted at the top of his lungs. Lu Ping naturally noticed the fervent look in his eyes. Lu Ping giggled and said, "Senior, if the spirit treasure isn't in my hands, who else could it be?" Hanya Laozu was speechless. Lu Ping understood immediately. When Chu Yi Laozu led the Northern Alliance disciples, it was already a dead end. Even if Hanya Laozu was not a participant, he must have known. No wonder the second-generation disciple of the Northern Alliance, Lin Jingtang, hated Hanya Laozu to the bone. Before he died, he would rather reveal the Northern Alliance's treasure to Lu Ping and use this as a condition for Lu Ping to kill him. Seeing Lu Ping's expression, how could Hanya Laozu not know that Lu Ping had already guessed something? He sneered. "You can wear out iron shoes in fruitless searching, only to find it by chance. Our sect needs the mist to suppress the Broken Water faction, and you delivered this to us. Since that's the case, I'm afraid we can't let you live today." Lu Ping snickered and said, "That depends on whether Senior has the ability or not." The word ability was spoken repeatedly. Like a great bell, what followed was a blue light with the lotus formation under Lu Ping's feet as the center, spreading all the way to the surroundings. The 12 frozen gentian beads behind Hanya Laozu shone brightly. Hanya Laozu secretly said, "Not good." But before he could do anything, the 12 gentian beads had broken free from the shackles of Hanya Laozu's ice magic power and hung in the sky again. The moment the gentian beads were about to break free, Hanya Laozu quickly retreated out of the lotus formation. However, the lotus formation under Lu Ping's feet began to extend in the direction of Hanya Laozu's retreat. For a moment, Hanya Laozu couldn't escape the coverage of the lotus formation. At the same time, After the 12 gentian beads broke free, without Lu Ping casting the telekinesis spell, the 12 gentian beads had already broken through space, divided into 12 directions, and surrounded the retreating Hanya Laozu in the formation again. To be able to control objects from a distance, and to be able to control 12 spirit-nurturing treasures at that. This person's attainments in the spatial divine arts were almost the same as his own. However, his divine will was so strange that he was actually able to control 12 treasures at the same time. The longer he tangled with Lu Ping, the more helpless Hanya Laozu felt. This was because the cultivator in front of him, whose cultivation was lower than his, really had the strength to fight against him. And his methods were endless. Every time Hanya Laozu thought that he had forced out all of Lu Ping's methods, Lu Ping would display a refreshing method. And every refreshing method made Hanya Laozu's heart tremble. The natal gentian formation, the 2 spirit treasures, the thin water flowing sword, and the mysterious and extremely annoying 5 elements flying sword. After careful calculation, there were a total of 13 spirit-nurturing magic treasures, 4 spirit treasures, and one of them was a second calamity spirit treasure. If an ordinary cultivator saw this, they would think that these treasures would belong to at least 10 Dharma adepts. But now, they had appeared in the hands of one person, and this person was using them as if they were nothing. Was he really only at the mid-Dharma stage? Even Hanya Laozu began to have doubts. This was because from the beginning until now, Hanya Laozu only had 3 spirit treasures on him, and 2 of them were originally in pairs, just like the thin water flowing sword in Lu Ping's hands. At this moment, it looked more like Hanya Laozu had been forced to use all his tricks by Lu Ping, and he seemed to be at his wits' end. Both sides fought for a while, but Lu Ping's pair of flying swords were not any weaker than Hanya Laozu's. Although the amethyst ice jade and the 2 spirit treasures were both second calamity spirit treasures, they were completely suppressed by the fierce attacks of the 2 spirit treasures. Even if Hanya Laozu originally had an advantage in terms of his level of practice, with the help of the natal gentian formation, not only was it negated by the geographical advantage, but after a long time, it began to restrict Hanya Laozu's abilities. The 12 gentian pearls had gradually become the deciding factor in the battle between the 2 sides. Hanya Laozu's protective treasures and magical powers were repeatedly destroyed by the gentian pearls, and his other tricks were constantly suppressed by Lu Ping, causing him to gradually become powerless. Naturally, Hanya Laozu would not give up just like that. With a loud roar, a white-furred ice tiger broke through his chest and forcefully squeezed out of the core space. Then, its body expanded, and a giant tiger Dharma power, 10 feet tall and 30 feet long, crouched behind Hanya Laozu. Its gaze was so intense that it could be said that it was like a tiger eyeing its prey. Lu Ping suddenly took a step back, and a sharp whistling sound swept in front of him. The giant tail, which was 15 feet long, swept silently towards Lu Ping. Lu Ping, who was hundreds of feet away, had no choice but to avoid it. However, although Lu Ping avoided it, he coincidentally smashed into a gentian pearl, causing the 5-colored light of the gentian pearl to scatter. It rolled all the way and almost flew out of the formation, although the Ice Tiger Dharma Power's sudden attack caught Lu Ping off guard, and Hanya Laozu's strength had obviously doubled after summoning the Dharma Power. The moment the gentian pearl was sent flying, the pair of purple jade bracelets, and the purple jade mysterious ice essence jade ring, which had been suppressed by Lu Ping, immediately broke free from the entanglement of the thin water flowing sword and the 2 breaks sword. The pair of purple jade bracelets fused into the forelimbs of the Dharma Power Ice Tiger, and the jade ring was imprinted on the king's symbol on the Ice Tiger's forehead. The giant tiger suddenly opened its mouth and swallowed Hanya Laozu's body into the belly of the Dharma Power Ice image. Lu Ping's expression was solemn, and his figure retreated rapidly, but the Dharma Power Ice image did not press forward. Instead, it suddenly raised its left forelimb and swung it. The Netherwater sword, which had hidden in front of the Dharma Power Ice image, and had been waiting for a lightning-fast strike, let out a mournful wail. The entire sword bent into the shape of a bow, and was directly sent flying out of the gentian formation. The ferocious tiger's forelimbs bent, and its hind limbs kicked, and its huge body suddenly pounced forward. The two-break sword of Mantis used a scissor kill, and two sky-piercing blade lights cut towards the neck of the Dharma Power Ice image. However, the giant tiger suddenly opened its forelimbs and pointed to the left and right. The two blade lights, which even a second tribulation spiritual treasure, the purple jade mysterious ice essence jade ring, had to retreat in the face of the Dharma Power Ice image's forelimbs. The thin water unstoppable sword took the opportunity to stab at the eyes of the Dharma Power Ice image. However, the king character on the forehead of the giant tiger was glowing, and a pair of flying swords began to condense a thick layer of ice in midair. Finally, they fell to the ground with a clang. The 12 gentian pearls changed into various offensive magical powers, such as killing God, suppressing mountain, and treading the sea. However, before they could get close to the Dharma Power Ice image, they were all sent flying by the giant tail. For a moment, Lu Ping used all his means, but he could do nothing to the Dharma Power Ice image. The Dharma Power Ice image suddenly fell to the ground, and its forelimbs, which could split a spiritual treasure in two, immediately tore at the white jade lotus formation on the ground. At this time, Hanya Laozu also realized that if he wanted to completely defeat Lu Ping, he had to break the strange formation space. And to break this formation space, the white jade lotus formation under Lu Ping's feet was the key. Unless Lu Ping put away the white jade lotus formation at this time, the natal gentian formation would basically be broken. Even if there were still 12 gentian pearls, but without the formation, the gentian pearls would be completely controlled by Lu Ping's divine thoughts, and their power would be greatly reduced. Seeing that the formation could not be intact under the Dharma Power Ice image's tearing, a strange roar suddenly sounded, and two giant claws like crocodile legs and eagle claws stretched out in midair, colliding with the front limbs of the Dharma Power Ice image. With a chi-la sound that made people's hair stand on end, the surrounding space was crushed and torn, and the huge force even directly tore a huge space crack. The giant tiger was suddenly thrown away by a huge force, and in the end, it returned without achieving anything, but the white jade lotus was safe and sound. The natal gentian formation still firmly trapped Hanya Laozu in the formation, and in the purple and gold Dharma Power Ice image floating above Lu Ping's head, a strange dragon with scales and claws occasionally circled in the Dharma Power Ice image. A strange but obviously provocative roar came from the cloud, making the Dharma Power Ice image on the other side uneasy. Chapter 1169. What kind of Dharma power was this? A look of fear flashed across Hanya Laozu's face, not because of the strange Dharma power hovering above Lu Ping's head, but because of the tyrannical strength that the Dharma power had displayed when it was wrestling with his ice tiger Dharma power. The giant tiger, who had survived 2 thunder tribulations, did not gain the slightest advantage over this strange Dharma power. In fact, the strange Dharma power even gave Hanya Laozu a feeling of longing for more. Outside the natal gentian formation, the Longhuai ancestor was now standing on the tallest of the 16 giant trees in the distance, looking at the void in front of him that was sealed by the natal gentian formation. Even a person like the Longhuai ancestor could not see what was happening in the void sealed by the formation. He could only vaguely feel that something strange was affecting him. A look of confusion flashed across his dull expression from time to time. Obviously, he did not understand what was happening in the formation space. The 16 giant trees under the feet of the Longhuai ancestor still formed a huge cage. Obviously, the 11 heirs of the Holy Land were still trapped in the formation. Looking at the expression of the Longhuai ancestor at this time, it was obvious that he did not care about it. The Dharma Power giant tiger was restless. It walked around the purple gold auspicious cloud from afar, but still did not dare to take the initiative to move forward. The golden auspicious cloud suddenly rolled towards the ice tiger. From time to time, the body of the strange Dharma power could be seen from the auspicious cloud. However, Hanya Laozu could not see the whole appearance of the strange Dharma power. The giant tiger Dharma power suddenly abandoned the strange Dharma power and rushed towards the body of Lu Ping, who was still in the lotus formation. Unexpectedly, it had only moved a few feet when it suddenly felt its body tighten. The strange Dharma Power's tail had easily broken through the protective light around the giant tiger Dharma Power and hit the body of the Dharma Power. The giant tiger Dharma Power cried out in pain, and its huge body was immediately whipped away. However, at this moment, the giant tiger Dharma Power swung its tail violently, shattering the space in its path as it went towards Lu Ping's body. The cloud sail soared into the sky. This attack, which could shatter space itself, only caused the cloud sail to tremble slightly. The thin stream sword suddenly shot back into the Dharma Power's auspicious cloud. Then, the eagle claw with a layer of light golden crocodile legs reached out again and pressed towards the Dharma Power giant tiger from afar. Above the head of the Dharma Power giant tiger, a huge claw suddenly stretched out from midair and pressed down on the head of the giant tiger. The giant tiger suddenly rushed forward, but the giant claw that had been dodged still broke through the air. The giant tiger suddenly opened its mouth and shouted. Along the way, there was a creaking sound. The giant claw was obviously frozen, and then with a crack, it shattered. The giant tiger roared at the strange Dharma Power's auspicious cloud. Then, it sacrificed itself and rushed towards the strange Dharma Power. The strange Dharma Power giant tiger was not afraid. The spirit treasure was broken in two and disappeared into the auspicious cloud. At the same time, it also rushed towards the giant tiger. The body of a snake, the legs of a crocodile, the tail of a carp, the antlers of a deer, the ears of a cow, the mane of a horse, the eyes of an eagle, and the claws of an eagle. This strange Dharma Power of the flood dragon was a combination of 7 bloodline characteristics. When Hanya Laozu finally got a glimpse of Lu Ping's Dharma Power, there was a look of surprise in his eyes. Then there was a feeling of fear in his heart. The strange flood dragon suddenly opened its mouth and spat out a huge bead. The bead suddenly lit up, and a strong pure yang aura suddenly emanated from the bead. The Dharma Power giant tiger that was rushing towards it let out a painful roar, as if countless fine needles had pierced through its skin. This was a pure yang bead. This was a pure yang bead that was completely condensed from pure yang qi. The chill in Hanya Laozu's heart became even colder. He had already gone through the second thunder tribulation, and he could only refine and absorb pure yang qi bit by bit. How would he dare to swallow a bead that was completely condensed from pure yang qi into the belly of the Dharma Power giant tiger? Wouldn't that completely melt the entire Dharma Power giant tiger? However, before Hanya Laozu could feel too much emotion in his heart, the dragon Dharma Power giant tiger had already rushed towards the ice tiger Dharma Power giant tiger. The dragon Dharma Power giant tiger's 2 claws tore off 2 balls of essence qi. The Dharma Power giant tiger itself was condensed from a cultivator's essence qi. After going through the thunder tribulation, this essence qi became even more spiritual. At the same time, it began to merge with the cultivator's divine will. The dragon Dharma Power giant tiger made the first move. It tore off 2 balls of essence qi from the ice tiger Dharma Power giant tiger. Hanya Laozu immediately felt a piercing pain in his heart. The ice tiger roared, and its 2 front claws reached towards the dragon Dharma Power giant tiger's body. At the same time, it opened its mouth wide, waiting for the 2 front claws to grab the dragon Dharma Power giant tiger and bite it. Whoosh! The ice tiger's front claws plucked off a layer of fine scales from the dragon Dharma Power's body. But in the end, it did not manage to bind the dragon Dharma Power. The ice tiger let out another cry of pain. The layer of scales that had been plucked off was actually a layer of sword light condensed from countless sword lights. It was not the essence of the dragon Dharma Power at all. The dragon Dharma Power seized the opportunity to break free from the ice tiger's grasp. It swept its front claws and slapped the ice tiger's open mouth to the side. It then grabbed a few more profound qi from the ice tiger's face. But this time, the dragon Dharma Power did not gain much of an advantage. The origin essence that had been grabbed suddenly froze one of the Dharma form's front claws. Fortunately, the Dharma form had reacted in time. A layer of scales on the front claws fell off, but they turned into pieces of scattered sword light. Then, They turned into drops of pure spirit qi and dissipated. At the same time, the sword intent contained within them also dissipated. The dragon Dharma power turned around in midair and slammed into the ice tiger's forehead. The ice tiger's forehead suddenly shone with a cold light. It was not afraid, but the two antlers on the top of the dragon Dharma power's head suddenly shot out a blade light. Impressively, the spirit qi had already merged with the spirit treasure. The ice tiger cried out in alarm, but at this time, it was too late to dodge. The two Dharma powers suddenly collided in midair, followed by a painful roar. Countless profound qi was flowing out of the ice tiger's forehead, and the dragon Dharma power was also pushed back dozens of feet by the collision. Although the ice tiger's forehead was protected by the amethyst mysterious ice essence jade ring, it still seemed weak in front of the spirit treasure. The layer of ice that was used to protect the ice tiger was hit and cut by the antlers. The sharp pain caused the tiger Dharma power to retreat and shake its head, as if trying to shake off the pain from its mind. A Dharma power that had passed the second thunder tribulation should have a more powerful Dharma power. The Dharma power should have bred a richer pure yang qi, and this pure yang qi was a sign of the Dharma power's growth. It was like an adult bullying a minor. However, the situation now was exactly the opposite. The adult found that the minor in front of him already had a strong physique that was not weaker than his strength. The only difference was that he had not reached the age that marked adulthood. However, when this minor reached the age of an adult, how much would he grow? Without waiting for the ice tiger Dharma power to recover from the violent impact, the pure yang pearl, which was suspended in midair and had been using the pure yang qi to wear down the ice tiger Dharma power's profound yuan, suddenly fell to the ground like a meteor. With a loud clang, it smashed into the ice tiger Dharma power's forehead. There was a cracking sound, and the mighty king character on the ice tiger's forehead suddenly had a few more cracks. The ice tiger Dharma power staggered for a moment and could not even stand steadily. Lu Ping looked at everything in front of him from the lotus array. He took advantage of the situation to activate the natal array, and the 12 gentian pearls brought up endless waves, turning the entire array space into a vast ocean. The dragon Dharma power's power in the ocean increased by 30%, but the ice tiger Dharma power seemed to be struggling in this spiritual energy ocean. However, very soon, something that made Hanya Laozu even more afraid happened. After the strange dragon Dharma power entered the huge waves, each wave was able to wash away the profound qi from the ice tiger Dharma power. And at the same time that the profound qi was taken away, there was something else that Hanya Laozu could clearly sense, because he could already feel his own vitality being lost. Although the loss was very small, it was endless. Hanya Laozu could even clearly feel that his physical body, which was protected by the Dharma power, was constantly aging. The vast seas of mulberry fields technique. After Lu Ping had advanced to the mid-Dharma stage, he was finally able to perfectly combine the natal gentian array with his natal supreme power. The explosive increase in power was far beyond Lu Ping's imagination. Hanya Laozu tried to use the 1,000 miles of ice again to completely freeze the waves of spiritual qi, but he heard Lu Ping suddenly use the spirit transformation secret technique in the middle of the lotus array. Before the supreme power could take shape, it had already taken away half of its power. After the supreme power had taken shape, the dragon Dharma power only needed to turn around in the waves of spiritual qi, and most of the frozen waves of spiritual qi around the ice tiger were released. Fighting with the dragon in the ocean, any kind of Dharma power would be inferior, not to mention this was an ocean that Lu Ping had created himself. At this point, Hanya Laozu finally panicked. Although he had been at a disadvantage before, Hanya Laozu had never thought that he would be in such a difficult situation. Or rather, he had never thought that his life would be in danger. It was only when Lu Ping had perfectly combined the Sea of Mulberry Fields technique with the natal gentian array that Hanya Laozu finally realized many things. This was because during the time that the spiritual qi ocean had taken shape, he had already realized that his life had been lost for 10 years. Run, run, run. Hanya Laozu was completely terrified. However, in this void where Lu Ping controlled everything, Hanya Laozu's intentions were quickly discovered by Lu Ping. The huge waves changed again. The waves no longer washed away the vitality of the Ice Tiger Dharma power. Instead, they were like iron brooms, sweeping away the vitality of the Ice Tiger Dharma power. The waves suddenly turned into huge waves of sword light. There was no escape, but the path of death was already slowly unfolding in front of Hanya Laozu. Chapter 1170. The Dharma form giant tiger leaped out of the sea, and Hanya Laozu also flew out of the giant tiger's belly. Riding on the giant tiger, they headed straight for the void that Lu Ping had sealed. At this time, Hanya Laozu did not even hesitate to damage his foundation and pay the price of no further progress in the future. He wanted to escape from the natal Genshin formation. He was afraid. However, the 12 stars were close at hand, but he could not reach the edge. Hanya Laozu was suddenly shocked. He was already in a mess, but he did not realize that he was being controlled by Lu Ping's magical power. Hanya Laozu stopped the flying Dharma form and was about to move, but he suddenly felt that his whole body was stagnant. Not only could his body no longer move, but the real essence in his body was also sealed in an instant. A white light from the White Lotus formation illuminated the entire Genshin formation, and the Dharma form of the dragon had blocked in front of him. Hanya Laozu shouted, and a blood arrow suddenly shot out from his chest. A snow-white handkerchief unfolded from the blood arrow, and a dazzling light suddenly suppressed the waves of spiritual qi in the formation. Even the Dharma form of the dragon in front of him was shocked by the terrifying aura emitted from the handkerchief and did not dare to move forward. However, it was only a shock. This handkerchief might have something that frightened the Dharma form of the dragon, but obviously, Hanya Laozu could not activate it. Otherwise, he would not have used this treasure when he was beaten so badly by Lu Ping. The heaven-opening relic. Lu Ping's first reaction was that this snow-white handkerchief wrapped by Hanya Laozu's blood must be the heaven-opening relic that caused the cultivation world to be in an uproar. However, at this time, Lu Ping had finally trapped Hanya Laozu, and it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Lu Ping could not care less about the heaven-opening relic. Hanya Laozu used this hidden handkerchief in his body to shock the fatal attack of Lu Ping's Dharma form of the dragon in one fell swoop. However, Lu Ping's methods were never unique. Just as Hanya Laozu took the opportunity to shake the real essence in his body, trying to break free from the white light, he suddenly felt a chill in his back. Hanya Laozu's heart suddenly sank to the bottom. When he looked down, the invisible flying sword that had been hit by the Ice Tiger Dharma form had unexpectedly sneaked back to Hanya Laozu's side. At this time, this attack was aimed at Hanya Laozu's vital point. The white light collapsed, and Hanya Laozu roared and finally broke free. However, his heart was pierced, and the core space collapsed instantly. This was a fatal injury. Patriarch Frigid Leaf was on the brink of death, and yet he still had a way to fight back. The collapse of his core space would usually kill his Dharma idol along with it. But right now, the Tiger Dharma idol was right beneath him. The tiger let out a roar, as if it knew that death was inevitable. It began to swell up like a balloon, and in the blink of an eye, it was about to burst out of the spell formation. Hanya Laozu was going to self-destruct, and he was going to perish together with his opponent. However, Lu Ping had painstakingly obtained this opportunity to kill his opponent. How could he let it go to waste just like that? Lu Ping suddenly patted his chest, and a wine cauldron rose up. Linglong's wine cauldron, another spiritual treasure. Lu Ping suddenly patted the body of the wine cauldron, and this time, Linglong jumped out of the wine cauldron and floated in the air. Then the whole giant cauldron began to spin rapidly under Linglong's body, and it spun faster and faster. A huge spiritual vortex suddenly communicated with the expanding Ice Tiger Dharma form, and it sucked back into the wine cauldron. Qingquan wine cauldron, you actually have a replica of the heaven-opening artifact. Hanya Laozu roared in despair and anger, but at this time, all that was left was a little of Hanya Laozu's spiritual will. His physical body had collapsed, and his death was inevitable. It was difficult for him to control the Dharma form at this time. The huge tiger Dharma form seemed sluggish and clumsy. After the wine cauldron continued to absorb spiritual energy, it did not know how to resist, and its huge body suddenly began to shrink. Explode! 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 Hanya Laozu, who had gone completely crazy, roared with the last of his strength in an attempt to detonate the entire ice tiger Dharma form. However, his voice was getting lower and lower, and gradually, it was almost inaudible, but the crazy obsession before death became stronger and stronger. At this time, the dragon Dharma form suddenly suspended the pure yang pearl in midair, and it was as if a huge sun was hanging in the gentian space. The giant tiger Dharma idol was, after all, a great cultivator who had survived 2 lightning tribulations. The pure yang energy contained in the Dharma idol was no weaker than that of the dragon Dharma idol. At that moment, strands of pure yang energy were being stripped from the Dharma idol's body and gathered in the pure yang pearl that was suspended in midair. Boom! In the end, the ice tiger Dharma form exploded, but after being weakened by the Linglong wine cauldron and the pure yang pearl, the power of the explosion had been greatly reduced. However, this was, after all, a great cultivator who was risking his life. The exploding ice tiger Dharma form wreaked havoc in the space of the gentian formation. The hanging cloud sail firmly protected Lu Ping's body, and the moment the dragon Dharma form exploded, it had already rushed into Lu Ping's core space with the pure yang pearl in its mouth. And before it returned to the core space, the dragon Dharma form's long tail curled up and took the snow-white handkerchief with it into the core space. The lotus formation and the 12 gentian pearls echoed from afar, trying their best to suppress the damage caused by the explosion. However, in the process of the gentian pearls flickering, the gentian formation could no longer maintain the integrity of the formation. The 12 gentian pearls were shaken away, and the white lotus formation dimmed for a while, bursting in all directions. The natal gentian formation was broken in the end. Just before the gentian formation was broken, Lu Ping reacted quickly and grabbed the 2 purple jade bracelets that flew out from the Dharma form. These 2 spiritual treasures were really good items. Of course, the better one was the jade ring. At the same time, the jade ring that was originally inlaid on the forehead of the ice tiger was also broken into several pieces and flew out. Lu Ping did not hesitate to leave the protection of the White Lotus formation and rushed into the center of the explosion with the cloud sail. He snatched the broken pieces of purple jade ice essence from the jade ring. Although the grade 2 spiritual treasure jade ring had been completely destroyed, and the spirit in it had also been annihilated, the purple jade ice essence itself was a first-class spiritual material in the cultivation world. Lu Ping was unwilling to let it be destroyed in the explosion. Unfortunately, the storage magical device on Hanya Laozu was destroyed by the power of the explosion before he could get it. Most of the things inside were destroyed along with the collapse of the storage magical device. A few lucky ones that were not destroyed were also shaken away by the power of the explosion. Lu Ping flew back quickly, but in the end, he was still affected by the explosion. He could no longer suppress the boiling blood in his body. A mouthful of hot blood splashed out from his mouth. In less than a foot, it turned into blood-red ice crystals and fell to the ground. The shockwaves from the self-detonation spread out in all directions, causing the temperature within a radius of several hundred meters to plummet. The ground that had already been ravaged by Patriarch Frigid Leaf's 1,000-kilometer icebound divine ability was now covered with a layer of frost. Lu Ping coughed loudly and tried to collect the things that were shaken away. However, there were only a few dozen of them. He roughly looked at them, and the quality was also uneven. It could be said that Hanya Laozu had planned to break out of the Northern Alliance for a long time. God knew how much of the treasures that the Northern Alliance had accumulated for thousands of years had been collected before he left. Even though he did not bring all of them with him, because the treasure ship was suddenly destroyed, he was probably much richer than people like Nanyu Laozu. It was a pity that this explosion had destroyed countless treasures. Lu Ping did not even care about his own injuries. You really killed that Hanya? Lu Ping had actually already noticed the Longhuai ancestor in the distance. At this time, Hearing his slightly surprised question, Lu Ping could not help but ask, "Why? Does Senior think that I am no match for that Hanya?" The Longhuai ancestor actually nodded and said, "Indeed. Although your strength is not bad, the old man does not think that you have the strength to kill a late Dharma adept. Especially that Hanya is not considered weak among the late Dharma adepts. I originally thought that you would at most be evenly matched with him, or even at a disadvantage. In fact, the old man had already prepared to attack at any time, but I really did not expect you to really have such strength." This was not false. During the time when Lu Ping and Hanya Laozu were fighting, Lu Ping did indeed notice that the Longhuai ancestor was watching his own life gentian space. The aura around him was indeed as if he was ready to attack at any time. Lu Ping smiled bitterly and said, "In fact, this battle of mine was really dangerous. Victory or defeat was decided in a split second, and it was obvious that my luck was not bad." The Longhuai ancestor nodded and said, "Your formation is really impressive." Lu Ping smiled and did not say anything else. The Longhuai ancestor's eyes were like torches. Lu Ping had revealed too many of his trump cards in this battle, and he did not know how much he had already noticed. Lu Ping casually released Debao and said, "Many treasures have been lost. How much you find will depend on your ability." Debao had seen the Longhuai ancestor before. Naturally, he knew that the person in front of him was an existence that should not be provoked. He hurriedly bowed to the Longhuai ancestor and hurriedly ran towards the forest. He had indeed discovered the aura of many treasures. Lu Ping thought for a moment and also summoned Lu Xiaoping. He ordered him to chase after Debao and protect him. Although the battle between Lu Ping and Hanya Laozu was covered by the life gentian formation, Hanya Laozu's self-explosion caused a great commotion. Although this place was remote, it was inevitable that it would attract the attention of cultivators, so it was better to be cautious. When the Longhuai ancestor saw Lu Xiaoping, he naturally knew that it was refined from the 8,000-year-old willow tree that he had gifted to Lu Ping. He smiled and said, "This child is not bad, and the person who refined it is also quite talented." Lu Ping smiled and said, "It was refined by one of my junior brothers. He is quite talented in the Tao of puppets." After receiving the inheritance of Senior's avatar, he became even more like a fish in water. Junior has to thank Senior on behalf of my junior brother. As Lu Ping said this, he took out a snow-white silk handkerchief from his clothes and said, "Junior obtained this from Hanya Laozu. I wonder if this is the item that Senior left behind in the past?" The Longhuai ancestor glanced at it and said indifferently, "Yes, it is. Just keep it. This item may be precious, but it is of no use to the old man. Just don't let it fall into the hands of the 6 holy lands." Chapter 1171. Previously, the Longhuai ancestor had already expressed that he would not take back this relic. He just did not want it to fall into the hands of the 6 holy lands. Lu Ping did not act pretentiously. After thanking him, he put the silk handkerchief back into his lapel. In fact, he kept it in the core space. Previously, when the dragon avatar avoided Hanya Laozu's self-destruction, it did not forget to bring this silk handkerchief into the core space. Lu Ping already knew that this silk handkerchief would be of great benefit to him. This time he took it out of caution. After all, this item originally belonged to the Longhuai ancestor. Although the Longhuai ancestor had said that he did not want this item, if Lu Ping kept this treasure without saying anything, it would be somewhat unreasonable. After just a cup of tea's time, the Longhuai ancestor's expression changed. "I'm afraid that someone will come soon. The old man will go first. Don't be greedy for small gains. You should also leave quickly." Lu Ping nodded and suddenly stamped his foot. A faint wave spread out from the ground. Only then did Lu Ping raise his head and ask, "Senior, are you going back to the East China Sea?" The Longhuai ancestor shook his head. The old man has been trapped in the secret perished land for tens of thousands of years. This time, it was not easy to get out of the fence. Naturally, I want to travel the world and experience the atmosphere of the cultivation world. Lu Ping smiled. "Then I hope that Senior can return to the cultivation world with joy." At the same time, I also hope that Senior can get out of the fence as soon as possible. The Longhuai ancestor smiled and said, no matter what, the old man cannot break through the myriad poison heavenly wall. He can only rely on external forces. Don't forget what you promised the old man. If one day you have the ability to break through the myriad poison heavenly wall, you must help the old man. Lu Ping said solemnly, I dare not forget. While they were talking, they heard Debao running over in the distance. Lu Xiaohai, who was sitting on his shoulder, grabbed Debao's ear tightly. As Debao ran, Lu Xiaohai giggled, which surprised Longhuai ancestor. Debao shouted, Boss, why did you call me? Although there are not many treasures scattered in this forest, their quality is not bad. I have only collected a small part of them. Lu Ping smiled and said, forget it. Let's not look for the rest. Someone is already coming. We should leave first. Debao was very disappointed. He was reluctant, but he also knew that the people coming would definitely be the cultivators of the Holy Land. He was afraid that there would be some great cultivators among them. If they were caught, not to mention the collected treasures, even their lives would be in danger. The Longhuai ancestor said, there are treasures in the handkerchief. There are some magical powers hidden in it. If you want to understand it, it depends on whether you have the ability to understand it. Just now, the old man noticed that although this thing has been abandoned for thousands of years, it is probably because of its identity as a heaven-opening relic. It has not been comprehended by anyone. The things inside are still intact. The Longhuai ancestor paused. He seemed to want to continue, so he said fiercely, what a waste. Lu Ping couldn't guess the meaning of the Longhuai ancestor, so he could only remain silent. The Longhuai ancestor said, the old man has left several heaven-opening relics, or other inheritances outside in the past tens of thousands of years. It was for the sake of someone finding a way to break the sky wall of myriad poisons in the future, allowing the old man to escape from the shackles. Unfortunately, no one has been able to do it. The Longhuai ancestor might be a giant locust tree, but it was trapped in the sky wall of myriad poisons for tens of thousands of years. Lu Ping could naturally imagine the loneliness. If it was really because of this, the Longhuai ancestor's mood could be understood by Lu Ping. But when he thought of the possible hidden connection between the Longhuai ancestor and Jiao Daoren, even Lu Ping didn't dare to look too deeply into the reason. Seeing that the Longhuai ancestor was about to leave, Lu Ping suddenly thought of something and asked, does Senior know Xiao Baiyu? Ancestor Longhuai's identity came to an abrupt halt, and then he turned around and said with a smile, I know what you want to ask. Since I entered the cultivation world this time, I've heard many shocking legends about this person. Moreover, I've witnessed his divine might in the past, and he can really be considered to be an extraordinary genius. However, this person isn't related to me at all. Moreover, if you attain the pure Yang realm in the future, then your strength might not necessarily be inferior to him. The Longhuai ancestor stretched out his hand and beckoned. 15 of the 16 giant trees jumped out of them. Avatars that were about the same size as Lu Xiaoping jumped out. After these avatars came out, they pounced on the Longhuai ancestor and disappeared. After these 15 avatars appeared from the giant trees, the originally silent giant tree cage suddenly exploded with a deafening roar. Longhuai waved his hand at Lu Ping, and then he vanished. Lu Ping's divine sense was outstanding, but he could only vaguely sense that the Longhuai ancestor seemed to be using the boundless forest to cast a magic power similar to the wood escape technique. However, this magic power was far superior to the wood escape technique. Lu Ping glanced at the giant tree cage. He could see that the Longhuai ancestor had actually drawn all the spiritual energy veins in the vicinity to this place. Moreover, the giant tree's formation was also very mysterious. Although the 15 avatars were no longer used as Dao soldiers, it would not be easy for the 11 heirs to break out of the giant tree cage in a short time. In the past, Jiao Daoren was famous throughout the entire cultivation world for his expertise in formations. He was even called the ancestor of formations by the cultivation world. Lu Ping thought to himself. After the Longhuai ancestor left, Lu Ping also cast a magic power and turned into a stream of water that merged with the clouds in the sky. He then disappeared. After about the time it took for an incense stick to burn, 2 streams of light from the east and west of the sky arrived first. The 2 streams of light dispersed, and a great Dharma adept walked out from each of them. They were the great adepts from the Lingyun Valley and the Skyward Pavilion, who were closest to this place. When the 2 great adepts saw the giant tree cage and heard that the heirs who were trapped within it were attacking the formation, the 2 of them actually did not make a move to rescue them. Instead, they walked towards the other side of the battlefield. This was naturally the place where Lu Ping and Hanya Laozu had fought previously. After Hanya Laozu's 1,000 miles of iced supreme magic power and his final self-destruction, this place had long been a mess. It's Hanya's 1,000 miles of ice. Looks like he's done for. Hanya Laozu had obviously fought with someone here, but the 11 heirs from the 5 Holy Lands were still trapped in the formation. This could only mean that Hanya Laozu had been defeated, captured, or killed. Otherwise, he would not have allowed these heirs to be trapped here. Following closely behind, the people from the 9 Xian Tower also arrived. They were also great adepts. When they saw that the 2 did not make a move to rescue their juniors, they naturally understood what the 2 were thinking. However, they also walked around the place where Hanya Laozu had fought. When they returned, they said, "What do the 2 of you think?" Without waiting for the 2 from the Lingyun Valley and the Skyward Pavilion to answer, the great adepts from the Wuxia School and the Xiang Palace also arrived. Putting aside the other 4 Laozus, when the great adepts from the Wuxia School arrived, their faces were full of anger. Soon everyone knew the reason. Hanya had died. This news also shocked the other 4 great adepts. Now that Hanya Laozu was obviously a member of the Wuxia School, which force would be bold enough to attack Hanya? These people had never thought that Hanya Laozu had died in the hands of one person. Usually, to kill a great adepts with a solid foundation like Hanya Laozu, at least 3 adepts of the same level were needed. Even if they had set up an ambush, it would not be easy for adepts of the same level to kill Hanya Laozu. At least, the 5 great adepts from the Holy Lands who were present did not have much confidence in doing so. So the heaven-opening relic is also lost. The great adepts from the Wuxia School looked gloomy, but he still nodded and said, "It is very likely lost. Our Wuxia School will definitely take revenge for this, and we will definitely get the heaven-opening relic back. By the way, can the heaven-opening relic really make up for the defect of the water-breaking branch?" The great adepts from the Wuxia School hesitated for a moment, but he still nodded and said, "Indeed. Junior brother Hanya found that the handkerchief contained the essence of the water-breaking branch, which could be used to replace the 2 halves of the spirit treasure. Moreover, there was also Jiao Doran's handwriting on the handkerchief, which seemed to contain something. Unfortunately, junior brother Hanya could not extract the essence of the water-breaking branch from it, nor could he learn anything from Jiao Doran's handwriting. However, when he thought about what happened to Xiao Baiyu, he wanted to bring it back to the sect, so, at the mention of Xiao Baiyu, it was the great adepts from the Xiang Palace's turn to look unhappy. He snorted heavily and said, "This time, we went for wool and came home shorn." The 5 great adepts were silent. Originally, the 5 Holy Lands wanted to use the heaven-opening relic to surround and kill Xiao Baiyu, but unexpectedly, their plan to surround and kill Xiao Baiyu on the Qingming River failed. The Wuxia School lost a great adepts, and the heaven-opening relic also disappeared. Later, the heirs of each sect who participated in this mission originally had the chance to learn the handwriting of Jiao Daoran, but now they did not have the chance. With a whistling sound of swords, the cage of the giant tree was broken. The sky was filled with sword lights like stars, and even the light of the day could not dim them. Su Jin and Guo Wanxing were the first to break through the giant tree's formation, and they killed their way out. The 6 supreme sword techniques of the Xiang Palace. Starry Sky Sword Technique, Chaotic Star Sword Technique. Sword cultivators were indeed the existence with the most tyrannical attacks. Su Jin and Guo Wanxing cooperated with each other, and the power of the 2 supreme sword techniques was even stronger. They were the first to break through the giant tree fence. However, After the two of them rushed out, they were on guard, as if they were ready to attack at any time. But soon the two of them were stunned. The 5 great adepts, including their seniors from the Xiang Palace, were looking at the two of them coldly. Their eyes were filled with great dissatisfaction. What was going on? Before the two of them could figure out the reason, another long whistle was heard. Wuxia School's Mu Changxing had finally broken through the giant tree's cage with the help of his deep attainments in the wood attribute cultivation method. Senior brothers from the Xiang Palace, the person who set up this formation is far stronger than us. Let us practice first. A disciple greets the 5 Laozu. Chapter 1172. After leaving the forest, Lu Ping took a big detour from afar, before heading towards the Qingming River, where the Northern Alliance's treasured ship had anchored earlier. By the time Lu Ping returned, the battle had already ended. The Northern Alliance's treasured ship on the Qingming River had already disappeared without a trace. Laozu, the pure yang in the sky, had also disappeared without a trace. Mara's army and the Dharma adepts of the various sects had also disappeared without a trace. Because of the flow of the river, there were no longer any traces of the previous battle on the surface of the river. Only the fallen trees on both sides of the river could prove that there had indeed been a huge battle that shocked the entire world of practitioners. Lu Ping went around the Qingming River and came to the small hill where he had previously hidden. 2 figures also appeared from the void. It was Tian Tian and Lu Tianyuan, the 2 Zhenling Dharma adepts. Between the two of them, Lu Ping's expression could not help but change. Tian Tian said, "Are you injured?" They had a rough idea of Lu Ping's strength. Among the adepts of the same level, unless they were surrounded and attacked by multiple people, it would not be easy to injure Lu Ping. Lu Ping smiled and said, "It's no big deal. It's just a normal injury. I'll recover in about 1 or 2 months." Lu Ping saw that although the two of them were not injured, they looked slightly tired. It was obvious that the previous battle on the Qingming River had not been easy. However, the two of them had a look of excitement in their eyes. It was obvious that the two of them had already snatched the treasured ship during the battle with Mara's army and had gained something from it. Lu Ping smiled and asked, "It seems that the two of you have gained a lot from the treasured ship?" Lu Tianyuan smiled and said, "It was a worthwhile trip. This time, besides the Northern Alliance adepts, the rest of the army that attacked Mara's army were mostly adepts from various sections. They obviously valued the treasures that the Northern Alliance adepts had hidden on the treasured ship and did not care about the ship itself. This actually allowed the two of us to take advantage of it. I snatched 2 masts, and Senior Tian Tian found 2.5 sails." Lu Ping's eyes lit up and he said, "Ah, these Dharma adepts of the Central Plains are really blind. How can the masts and sails on the treasured ship be made up of ordinary treasures? All of them are natural treasures. The two of you have gained a lot. Just the masts and sails alone made this trip worthwhile. Our sect's treasured ship will definitely be repaired much faster." Tian Tian was still a little dispirited and said, "It's a pity that there are still some people who know what's good. After we snatched the masts and sails, it was obvious that the overseas adepts also joined in. Everything on the treasured ship, and even the ship itself, began to be snatched. Some even attacked everything on the ship. Anything that could be smashed down was collected. We no longer have a chance." Lu Ping smiled and said, "This is already considered not bad. If the two of you had snatched too much, I'm afraid you would have become a thorn in the other party's side. At that time, the consequences would only be more serious." "That's true." The two of them could not help but laugh. Lu Ping thought of something and pointed to the sky. He said, "What was the result of the battle between the pure young Laozu?" The two of them could not help but reveal a strange and shocked expression. In the end, it was Lu Tianyuan who said, "After junior brother left, another pure young Laozu attacked." Ah, this time, even Lu Ping was shocked. He said, 9 pure young Laozu? Since when did the pure young Laozu become so worthless in the world of cultivation? Lu Tianyuan said, The last Laozu that attacked seemed to be extremely excited. He had not even entered the cloudy space, but with just one strike, he broke up the battle of the pure young Laozu. After that the Laozu dispersed. Dispersed? Just one strike and it was scattered? Tian then explained. That strike did indeed disperse everyone. But then these Laozu left separately in different directions. Only the pure young Laozu that came later seemed to be chasing after Xiao Baiyu's escaped light towards the east. Lu Ping really could not figure out the mystery. Could it be that the person who came later was an existence that was higher than everyone else? Could it be that he was able to shock the 8 pure young Laozu in one fell swoop? Then what was the existence that was higher than the pure young Laozu? Even Lu Ping didn't dare to think about it any further. If he had been there at that time, he might have been able to use the 3 pure eyes to see something. Unfortunately, he was not there at that time, so naturally he did not know the situation at that time. However, after the pure young Laozu left, it was obvious that they realized that no one could do anything to the other. The 5 holy lands could not kill Xiao Baiyu, so this plan naturally fell through. Xiao Baiyu could not pass the 5 pure young Laozu, so naturally, they could not obtain the treasure of opening the heavens. Naturally, they would not make any more useless efforts. Lu Ping did not dwell on this, so he asked, "What about the Mara army and the treasure ship?" Tian said, "In today's battle, there were dozens of Dharma adepts gathered on the Qingming River. When they attacked together, Mara's army was completely destroyed, and the treasure ship was robbed until only an empty shell was left. After that, it was taken away by the people of the Skyward Pavilion. The rest of the practitioners naturally would not provoke the Skyward Pavilion." Lu Ping said curiously, "The Lingyun Valley should be the closest to here. Why did they let the people of the Skyward Pavilion take away the treasure ship?" Lu Tianyuan said, "The Lingyun Valley must be having a headache now. Magic Cloud City was attacked by the Mara army, and less than 10% of the practitioners in Magic Cloud City survived. After that, Peacock Royalty took the opportunity to lead the Endless Mountain Demon Clan to expel the Mara army in Magic Cloud City and occupy it. Now the Endless Mountain Demon Clan may even want to build the Magic Cloud City there. How can the Lingyun Valley take care of it? Magic Cloud City could be regarded as a subsidiary force of the Lingyun Valley, and it was also a very important stronghold. It was a key link in the cooperation between the Lingyun Valley and the Skyward Pavilion to prevent the Endless Mountain Demon Clan from penetrating into the central mainland. Now Peacock Royalty had seized the opportunity to occupy Magic Cloud City, and the reason why Peacock Royalty had given them was so reasonable. After all, Mara had been expelled from Magic Cloud City. Unless the Lingyun Valley and the Skyward Pavilion wanted to forcibly start a war with the Endless Mountain Demon Clan, they would never give up Magic Cloud City. Lu Ping looked at the 2 senior martial brothers and asked, "Senior martial brothers, what do you plan to do next?" Lu Tianyuan said, "We have to go back to the sky-filling courtyard first and inform the sect of what happened here. We also have to return the masts and sails of these treasure ships to the sect." Tian said, "After that, we have to travel to the cultivation world of the central mainland again. The central mainland is vast, and the knowledge gained from this trip to the Green Netherworld River is far greater than that of being confined in the North Sea." Lu Tianyuan said, "Junior martial brother, aren't you going back to the North Sea?" Lu Ping shook his head and said, "I still have a remarkable power to learn, and it's a critical moment now. I still have to drift on the Green Netherworld River for a while." Both of them had looks of envy on their faces. When the 2 of them had advanced to the Dharma stage, they had each learned a great special power. Such an achievement was already considered outstanding among the Dharma adepts of Jinling. However, they also knew how difficult the process of learning a great special power was, and how strong a practitioner's foundation was. However, this junior martial brother in front of them had trained far less than the 2 of them, but he had at least cultivated several great special powers, and he had even succeeded in condensing a supreme power. Now that he had advanced to the mid-Dharma stage, it was unknown how many more special powers he would have. Lu Ping did not know what the 2 of them were thinking, But he remembered something. He stretched out his hand and opened up the space in the house of gold. Deng Ming walked out from inside a little confused. Seeing Deng Ming, Lu Tianyuan and Tian Tian were also stunned. Lu Ping then said, "This is Junior Martial Brother Deng Ming, an array master that I met when I was traveling in the South Sea. Now that I've asked Junior Martial Brother Deng Ming to join our sect, and he has already inherited our sect's array techniques. Now that the two of you are returning to the sect, you can bring Junior Martial Brother Deng along as well." With that, he introduced Lu Tianyuan and Tian Tian to Deng Ming. When Lu Tianyuan and Tian Tian heard that Deng Ming was actually an array master, they saw a hint of joy in each other's eyes. The two of them also understood what Lu Ping meant. It was obvious that he wanted to tell them that Deng Ming was a trustworthy person, and that he could definitely participate in the repair of the treasured ship after returning to the sect. Right now, the repair of Jinling's treasured ship had entered a critical stage. Because the sect had two tool refinement masters, Jinling only had one array master, Daoist Xianchen. As a result, the repair of the array formations on the treasured ship was far behind. It was not coordinated with the repair of the ship's hull, and it had even begun to hinder the repair of the ship. Tianjiang Laozu was very anxious, but he could not say much. After all, Jinling's current foundation was still somewhat insufficient, and Tianjiang Laozu did not have much lifespan left, so he was clearly a little anxious. Now that another trustworthy array master had joined the repair of the treasured ship, Jinling's current predicament would naturally be easily resolved, and the repair of the treasured ship would definitely be greatly increased. Deng Ming was different from Daoist Xianchen. Perhaps Deng Ming's accumulation of knowledge in arrays was currently not as good as Daoist Xuanchen's, but Deng Ming was far younger than Daoist Xianchen. Now he had also received the inheritance of two top array masters in the cultivation world, and he had gained new knowledge on Kongming Island. Most importantly, he even had the possibility of entering the Dharma stage in the future. Once he accumulated enough knowledge, his future achievements would far exceed Daoist Xuanchen's, and he would definitely become the new authority of Jinling in the field of arrays. On the surface of the river that was a few miles wide, the water of the Qingming River flowed in waves. On the back of a huge black turtle, Lu Ping leisurely enjoyed the river breeze, allowing De Gui to swim in the Qingming River. However, at this time, although Lu Ping seemed to be leisurely in reality, most of his attention had already been focused on the core space. To be more specific, he was focused on the snow-white handkerchief that floated above the white lotus in the core space, with the Dharma power of the dragon revolving around it. The quality of this handkerchief alone was probably many times better than the sails of the treasured ships that Tian Tian had snatched earlier. And on the lower right corner of the handkerchief, there was a colorful phoenix that was 3 inches long, looking very lively, flapping its wings as if it was about to take flight. Could it be that this handkerchief belongs to Luan Daoist? Lu Ping was suspicious, but he could not find anything on the handkerchief with his divine sense. Then where was Jiao Doran's handwritten letter? The purple gold eyes of the dragon Dharma power of the dragon suddenly turned blood red, and a sense of sorrow, murderousness, and heroism came rushing at him. Lu Ping, who was lying on the back of the black turtle, was shocked. Chapter 1173. The battle at Qingming River shocked the world. First, Magic Cloud City was destroyed. The entire large sect had tens of thousands of practitioners, but only a few hundred of them managed to escape. After that, less than 200 practitioners of Magic Cloud City, led by Xianyin Laozu, were annexed by Lingyun Valley. After that, the 5 pure Yang practitioners of the 5 Holy Lands set up an ambush above Qingming River to kill Xiao Baiyu. Unexpectedly, Yang Shouchang, the pure Yang practitioner of the Peacock royalty, and Laozu of Tianxian sect came to help Xiao Baiyu. The final result was even more surprising. Xia Yozi of Lingyun Valley was beaten up by Yang Wangdi. Under Yang Wangdi's deliberate prank, Xia Yozi's hair was disheveled like a ghost. All the practitioners who gathered at Qingming River at that time saw it, and it immediately became a joke in the cultivation world. It was very embarrassing. If it was because Yang Wangdi had the 5 elements spiritual light fan, then it was reasonable for Xia Yozi to be defeated. But when Muyi Laozu of Wuxing School was completely suppressed by Laozu of 7 elements spiritual light fan, and finally returned with injuries, everyone was shocked. Since when did the pure young Laozu of the 5 holy lands become so easy to bully? For a time, the practitioners were at a loss, and they all attributed the reason to the spirit treasures in the hands of the 2 pure young practitioners of Laozu. Needless to say, Yang Wangdi's 5 elements spiritual light fan was a spirit treasure derived from the supreme magical power practiced by Peng Daoren in the past. The 7 spiritual fans in the hands of Laozu of 7 elements spiritual light fan, which was a replica of the 7 feathers fan of Wan Daoist, also shocked the world. Legend had it that the 7 feathers fan of Wan Daoist was made from the true spirit feathers of 7 kinds of phoenix bloodlines. It was a powerful heaven-opening artifact. At the beginning of the world, the Wan Daoist used the 7 feathers fan to control the weather of the world. It was sunny, cloudy, rainy, foggy, snowy, windy, and frosty. As long as the 7 feathers fan of Wan Daoist was waved, the world would change. The 7 feathered fans in Elder 7 fans' hands could not be combined into one. Although the feathers of the 7 spirit birds all belonged to the bloodline of the Wan, 4 of them were feathers obtained from pure young spirit birds, while the other 3 were even worse. They were feathers obtained from 3 different spirit birds, with Dharma great adepts level of cultivation. Although the Tianxian sect had spent a lot of effort on these 7 feathers over the past thousands of years, improving their quality, they were still restricted by nature. Until now, they had only survived the second thunder trial. Even so, the battle at the Qingming River had shocked the cultivation world with the power of the 7 feathers. Although the 7 fans could not be combined, they were a set. Even the Wuxing School's Muyi Laozu, who had lost to the 7 feathers fan of Laozu, had to admit afterward that even a pure young spirit treasure that had survived the third thunder trial was nothing more than this. However, the so-called pure young spirit treasure, of course, the main character of this battle was not these people, but the sky-splitting sword saint. Although Xiao Baiyu had the help of 2 pure young spirit treasures, he still had to fight 1 against 3. However, the final result did not disappoint the cultivation world. Wang Xianqing fought fiercely, but in the end, he was forced by the sword qi. The second tribulation spirit treasure in his hand was knocked down a step, and he was also invaded by the sword qi. After returning to the Xiang Palace, he went into seclusion, and had not come out until now. The cultivation world guessed that this time, Wang Xianqing must have been seriously injured. Pure Young Laozu's flying fork formation was also an unruly existence in the Nine Xian Tower. She had once publicly challenged the pure Young Laozu of the Nine Xian Tower as a late Dharma practitioner. Although she had lost miserably, she was someone that no one in the Nine Xian Tower dared to provoke. This time, when she advanced to the pure Young level, she originally wanted to use Xiao Baiyu to show off. Who would have thought that Xiao Baiyu would break the flying fork formation with 1 sword strike? This caused her to be disgraced, and she had to run back to the Nine Xian Tower with her tail between her legs. Among the 3 of them, the one who suffered the least damage was Bailey Changtian Laozu of the Skyward Pavilion. This Laozu seemed to have some friendship with Xiao Baiyu in the past. In this battle, Bailey Changtian's space magic was also broken by Xiao Baiyu, but in the end, he was able to escape unscathed and did not suffer any serious injuries. It must be known that in the beginning, Xiao Baiyu was besieged by 5 people. After the 2 pure young Laozu rushed over to help, Xiao Baiyu had in fact already been injured under the siege of 5 pure young adepts. But even so, he still managed to return victorious after fighting 1 against 3. In fact, this sky-splitting sword sage even had the time to destroy the treasured ship of the Northern Alliance with 1 sword strike. In the end, the 5 holy lands went for wool and came home shorn. Just as the pure young Laozu of the 5 holy lands conspired to kill Xiao Baiyu, a huge battle broke out on the 3 sky-splitting islands of the East Sea, and Skyrend almost became history. The Crystal Palace gathered 4 great adepts, 9 mid-Dharma Laozu, and a number of early Dharma adepts. Under the leadership of the pure yang adept Yuan Lei Laozu, they took the opportunity to attack the 3 sky-splitting islands. Skyrend fought back. Skyrend was one of the 2 remaining great adepts. In order to resist the power of Yuan Lei Laozu's pure yang power, he suddenly self-destructed while negotiating with the Crystal Palace adepts. Not only did the Crystal Palace adepts not expect this, even the adepts of Skyrend did not expect Laozu to be so violent. Because it was unexpected, the Crystal Palace was caught off guard. Including Yuan Lei Laozu, the 7 Dharma adepts of the Crystal Palace were all included in the range of Laozu's self-destruction. Yuan Lei Laozu vomited blood on the spot. Of the 2 great adepts, one was seriously injured, and the other was on the verge of death. 2 mid-Dharma adepts and 2 early Dharma adepts of the 3rd generation died on the spot. The Crystal Palace was naturally angry that they had suffered such a setback before they had even made a move. However, when Skyrend saw their own Laozu self-destruct, they naturally thought that the Crystal Palace had gone too far, and became even more resentful. When the Crystal Palace was still attacking the Silver Sword Island with a greater advantage, everyone in Skyrend was united in their hatred of the Crystal Palace, and actually dealt damage to the Crystal Palace that was far greater than Skyrend's own damage. However, the Crystal Palace was ultimately too powerful. The Silver Sword Island quickly fell, and Skyrend retreated to the Gold Sword Island. Seeing that the Gold Sword Island was about to fall, and that Skyrend was in danger, the Green Sea Snakes suddenly intervened. Under the leadership of Chu Yunxiu, the pure Yang Laozu of the Wind Serpent clan, a few Dharma adepts, they formed a pincer attack with Skyrend. The situation in the East Sea cultivation world changed drastically, and the cultivators of the Crystal Palace retreated again and again. With the help of the Jade Sea Spirit Snake clan, the Sky-Splitting Sword sect had successfully reclaimed the Silver Sword Island, but the Crystal Palace had a strong start and a weak finish. In the end, they returned to the Crystal Palace with a huge loss of 1 Grand Adept, 3 Mid-Dharma Adepts, and 6 early Dharma Adepts. Among them, the Great Adept of the Crystal Palace, who was seriously injured by Elder Skyrend's self-destruct, was killed because when the Green Sea Snake suddenly appeared, pure Yang Laozu and Chu Yunxiu inadvertently blew a breath of air. Unexpectedly, the heavily injured Great Adept was blown to death. However, Skyrend also suffered a huge loss. Not only did a Great Adept Elder die in battle, but even with the advantage of the island's protective formation, 2 of the mid-Dharma adepts had fallen, and 4 of the early Dharma adepts had also died. To the whole of Skyrend, this was no less than a blow to the vitality of the whole of Skyrend. Skyrend was also a sect that had risen very quickly in recent years. Otherwise, it would not have been suppressed by the Crystal Palace with all its might. Over the years, with the power of Xiaobayu, apart from Xiaobayu, pure Yang Laozu, Skyrend originally had 3 great adepts, 6 mid-Dharma adepts, and 11 or 12 Dharma adepts. This time, it had suddenly lost a third of them. Although on the surface, it seemed that the Crystal Palace had suffered a greater loss, but the Crystal Palace had dominated overseas for tens of thousands of years. As the only major sect overseas, there had long been rumors in the world of practitioners that the Crystal Palace was the real #1 holy land in the world of practitioners. 10 Dharma adepts, including 1 great adept, had fallen. Although the loss was huge, it was far less serious than the loss of Skyrend. However, the most surprising thing was the attitude of the Green Sea Snake. In this internal strife among the human practitioners, the Green Sea Snake had actually chosen to stand on the side of Xiaobayu. Thinking back to the previous battle at the Qingming River, the peacock race in the Endless Mountains seemed to have also stood on the side of Xiaobayu. Although Yang Shouchang, the royal brother, was famous for being unreliable in the world of practitioners, Yang Wangdi's identity made it so that no one dared to underestimate the attitude of the peacock royalty. The world of practitioners was a treacherous place. Apart from these famous sects, tribes, and clans, no one could see the current situation in the world of practitioners. However, at this time another piece of news came from the world of practitioners. The great spiritual apes of the North Ice Plains, who had rarely appeared in the world of practitioners, suddenly appeared everywhere in the world of practitioners. Immediately after the peacock royalty, Yang Wangdi was once incited by someone to make a slip of the tongue when he was messing around in the Central Plains. He said that during the battle at the Qingming River, the last pure Yang adept who entered the battlefield was actually the former general of the great spiritual apes, Yuan Pokong. That guy is a madman, even crazier than Xiao Baiyu. He doesn't like to fight one-on-one, but he loves to fight in groups. Whenever he sees a group fight, he'll rush up and start a fight. After he messed things up like that, everyone else became his enemy. If it was a one-on-one fight, I naturally wouldn't be afraid. But who would be able to take a beating from him? You all saw it for yourselves. It wasn't just me, everyone else scattered. I heard that after Senior Laozu defeated the Unfettered One, and everyone dispersed, that Yuan Pokong chased after Xiao Baiyu and Laozu. Senior, do you know why? Could it be that this Senior Yuan Pokong is also here to help Xiao Laozu? As he poured wine for Yang Wangdi, he asked about the minor repairs of an ordinary tavern in the Central Plains. Yang Wangdi looked at minor repairs from the corner of his eyes and said, "Brat, you've got some guts. You dared to trick me." That gaze scared the minor repairs out of his wits, but Yang Wangdi chuckled and said, "Then I'll tell you." Minor repairs cursed in his heart. "You're a pure young great cultivator. Do you feel any sense of accomplishment scaring a waiter like me?" Actually, Yuan Pokong suffered a loss at Madman Zhao's hands all those years ago. Oh, then this Yuan Pokong Laozu went to take revenge. Then Laozu, did you also lose to Xiao Laozu back then? How could I possibly lose? Yang Wangdi immediately jumped up like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, and said, "He was the one who lost to me, okay? Is that okay?" The waiter hurriedly nodded and said, "Good, good. How could Xiao Laozu be your opponent? A 5-element spiritual light fan is enough to send him back to the East Sea." Yang Wangdi immediately beamed with joy, and his expression was full of praise. He then took out a stone and gave it to Minor Repairs. Minor Repairs hurriedly thanked him, and when he raised his head, Yang Wangdi had already disappeared. Only then did he realize that the stone in his hand was actually a top-grade spirit stone. The next day, the tavern was burned into ruins. The culprit was unknown, but Yang Wangdi's words in the tavern had spread. Chapter 1174. Although Yang Shouchang had finally confirmed that the wise Great Ape clan had entered the cultivation world of the Central Plains, the cultivation world had never forgotten about the fuse of all these events, the heaven-opening relic in Hanya Laozu's possession. Regardless of whether it was the 6 sacred lands or the demon clan, none of them said a word about this matter. However, as time passed, news gradually spread. Hanya Laozu had never appeared in Wuxing School. Hundreds of miles north of the Qingming River, a great battle had broken out in a forest. After the battle, some cultivators had seen cultivators from the 5 holy lands in the vicinity, including the 11 cultivators who had rushed out of the Northern Alliance's treasure ship. As a result, the cultivation circle was once again filled with various rumors and speculations. Some said that Han Yi was dead and the heaven-opening relic had fallen into the hands of others. Some said that the 5 holy lands killed him afterwards. Some said that the heaven-opening relic did not exist and was just used to lure Xiao Baiyu and so on. However, at this moment, the murderer of Hanya Laozu and the ultimate owner of the Northern Alliance's heaven-opening relic were resting on the back of a black tortoise on the Qingming River. On the other hand, although Lu Ping looked relaxed, his entire mind was focused on the handkerchief woven from the frost silk in his heart core. The eyes of the Dharma form of the dragon flickered with a green and red light. Characters began to appear on the snow-white silk handkerchief. The battle of the ice plains concerns the Khanate. For you, I will kill my way through this world. Only death awaits me. Determination, sorrow, heroism, sternness, killing intent, sword intent, affection. All the artistic conception came from these words. For a moment, Lu Ping was deeply immersed in the artistic conception expressed by these words. The Dharma form of the dragon shook its head and wagged its tail. The pearl of pure yang in its abdomen shone brightly. Lu Ping's divine sense finally sensed that something was wrong. The jade phosphorus soul fire blazed, and began to struggle to break free from the binding of this artistic conception. Fortunately, Lu Ping's divine sense was outstanding, and he had the help of the jade phosphorus soul flame. So he quickly broke free from the complex concepts expressed in these 20 words. However, Lu Ping still couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. It was just a few words, but they gave Lu Ping such a horrifying feeling. The heaven-splitting ancestors were truly people who could only be looked up to. Lu Ping, who had just woken up, didn't have the time to ponder over the artistic conception that Jiao Daoren had expressed in the 20 words at that time. Instead, he began to let his imagination run wild over the meaning of the 20 words. Who was Jiao Daoren going to fight in the icy plains? At the beginning of the world, besides the seventh patriarch himself, who else could threaten the existence like Jiao Daoren? Did the threat come from outside this world? However, considering the relationship between Jiao Daoren and Peng Daoren, and the fact that Jiao Daoren failed to ask Taoist, who to refine the sword of the immortal spirit, Lu Ping was more willing to believe that the seventh patriarch had a dispute with him. So what was the purpose of the dispute? Perhaps the reason lay in the 4 words. It's about the congenital. But what did the congenital mean? Lu Ping was still confused. The understanding of the congenital in the cultivation world was more like inborn and gifted. But in any case, these had nothing to do with the 7 heaven-splitting ancestors. Laozu. I'll kill my way through this world for you. Only death awaits me. It was easy to understand. It seemed that Jiao Daoren was not optimistic about the upcoming battle in the icy plains, and had risked his life. But it seemed that his life was not for him, but for others. Who was Jiao Daoren fighting for? Looking at the silk handkerchief, and the Taiwan ornament in the lower right corner of the silk handkerchief, the answer to the question seemed to be obvious. In the Battle of the Icy Plains, Jiao Daoren wanted to fight for the Luan Taoist. The purpose of the congenital was also to fight for the Luan Taoist, even at the cost of his own life. As for why Jiao Daoren wanted to fight for the Luan Taoist, it was not difficult to understand. The 7th patriarch of the heaven-splitting ancestors had 4 men and 3 women. Among them, Taoist, who was a tall and sturdy woman, a real tigress and extremely fierce, while Luan Taoist and Taoist Chan were both charming great beauties. With Jiao Daoren's romantic personality, it was not strange if he really fell for the Luan Taoist skirt. Even if he had to pay with his own life for this, it might not be worth it in many people's eyes, or even a child's play. But no one knew whether Jiao Daoren believed in the saying, "Even if I die under a peony flower, I'll still be a romantic even as a ghost," and intended to verify it himself. All the mysteries seemed to revolve around the congenital, but Lu Ping had no clue what the congenital, in Jiao Daoren's words, meant. Lu Ping slowly sat up on the back of the black tortoise, stretched out his arms, and then looked to the north across the sky. The northern ice plains. It was said that the Laozu who achieved the true spirit in the cultivation world would eventually disappear there. And it was also the place where the 7th patriarch of the heaven-splitting ancestors disappeared. It was said that the 7th patriarch of the heaven-splitting ancestors had opened a door to the outside world, and then disappeared from the northern ice plains. Everyone thought that the 7th patriarch had gone to a place outside of this world, and the true spirit cultivators of the cultivation world had all left the northern ice plains through the exit that the 7th patriarch had left behind. This legend was not groundless. It was spread to the world before the 7th patriarch went to the northern ice plains, and outside the passage, the 7th patriarch had set up a large formation. Those who were not Jinling cultivators were not qualified to pass through the formation. In addition to testing the qualifications of cultivators to leave this world, this great formation was also used to protect this passageway. Not only was it used to protect it from being destroyed by cultivators from this world, it was also used to protect this passageway from being invaded by things from outside this world. However, from the looks of it now, it seemed that the passageway leading to the outside world, under the cover of the layers of formations in the northern ice plains, hid many secrets that outsiders did not know about. Unfortunately, All those who might know about these secrets never returned after entering the formation. The formation in the northern ice plains was the final goal of all the cultivators in this world. From the moment it appeared, it was covered in a layer of holiness. However, when Lu Ping looked to the north, he could not help but feel a shadow in his heart. Just what was behind the formation? Lu Ping shook his head and no longer thought about these things. With his current cultivation, he was far from having the qualifications to think about going there. However, the handwriting written by Jiao Daoren on the silk handkerchief had been spread to the world. Regardless of whether or not someone had truly comprehended any magical abilities from the handkerchief, at the very least, the contents of the handkerchief were known by more than one person. At the very least, Hanya Laozu knew about it. Otherwise, how could it have been spread to the world by the 5 holy lands? However, the 6 holy lands had spread Jiao Daoren's handwriting to the world, but they did not spread the contents of the handkerchief. It seemed that the 6 holy lands only wanted to use the handkerchief to kill Xiao Baiyu. They did not want to give up on the handkerchief written by Jiao Daoren. Could it be that the 6 holy lands themselves wanted to cover up this news? Although Lu Ping was a little uncertain, it was not impossible. At the very least, the 6 holy lands had been established at the beginning of the world. The founder of the 6 holy lands, Laozu, had more or less been directly or indirectly related to the 7th patriarch. If one were to say who knew the most secrets of this world, it would probably be the 6 holy lands. In the core space, the dragon form once again opened its eyes wide to carefully study the handkerchief. This time, it was not looking at the contents of the handkerchief, but observing the handwriting. In the past, Xiao Baiyu had comprehended a peerless sword technique from the handkerchief written by Jiao Daoren. How could Lu Ping let go of such an opportunity? He had to give it a try after all. However, after observing for a while, even Lu Ping himself did not know how much time had passed. But he gained nothing. He could not help but feel discouraged. He thought to himself, could it be that only a pure sword practitioner like Xiao Baiyu, who has the extraordinary comprehension in the world, can comprehend something from it? Or maybe there is no peerless sword technique in these handkerchief at all. Lu Ping had no choice but to wake up from his meditative state again. He looked around and found that Xian Tortoise was following the flow of the river. He didn't know where it was now, but he noticed that the Qingming River seemed to flow a lot more smoothly. There were no longer hills and forests on both sides but an endless plain. Lu Ping guessed that he was now in the middle of the Qingming River. On the plain, the green sea was rolling, but it was not seawater but farmland. There were many figures in the farmland, but many mortals were working in it. Such a scene could also be seen overseas, but it was not as vast as the mainland. Besides, the number of cultivators and mortals in the overseas cultivation world was far less than that of the mainland. However, the ratio of cultivators and mortals in the overseas cultivation world was slightly higher than that of the mainland. There were also spiritual fields in the farmland from time to time, because of the existence of spiritual gathering places. Therefore, low-level cultivators could often be seen flying in the sky, and the mortals on the ground had long been accustomed to it. Lu Ping's eyes were so sharp that he soon found that most of these low-level cultivators were minor repairs in the blood-refining realm. However, the flying celestial tools under their feet were mostly celestial tools. Thinking of the joy of obtaining a celestial tool, when he was in the late blood-refining realm, the popularity of celestial tools among the blood-refining realm cultivators in the mainland was obviously much higher than that of the North Sea. Thinking of refining celestial tools, Lu Ping suddenly made an O sound. Strictly speaking, the silk handkerchief was only made of extremely high quality, but it itself was not a celestial tool or a magic treasure. Those who obtained it would naturally not try to refine it with their true essence. At this time, an idea popped up in Lu Ping's mind for no reason. Should I try refining it with my true essence? The true essence was like a surging sea, instantly immersing the entire handkerchief in it. The colorful phoenix in the lower right corner of the silk handkerchief shone brightly, and the lifelike colorful phoenix seemed to be alive. At the same time, 3 inexplicable auras were suddenly attracted by Lu Ping's vigorous true essence, But Lu Ping's eyes became brighter and brighter. There was really something strange inside. Chapter 1175. Longhui ancestor once said that there was a treasure hidden in the silk handkerchief. After Hanya Laozu obtained it, he wanted to bring it back to Wuxia school to make up for the shortcomings of the water-broken school. However, although the two of them could sense that there was a treasure hidden in the silk handkerchief, they didn't know what the treasure was. Of course, it was also possible that Longhui ancestor knew what was inside, but he didn't tell Lu Ping. However, when Lu Ping's real essence flowed into the silk handkerchief, he encountered a strange thing. With Lu Ping's current arcane essence, his arcane essence was already rich and pure. The North Sea Wave Listening Scripture, a mysterious cultivation method, had extremely strict requirements on the purity of his arcane essence. As a result, when he was in the core forging realm, he chose to fuse with 1 heaven low-grade arcane essence, 2 heaven mid-grade arcane essences, and 3 heaven high-grade arcane essences. This method of fusion was one of a kind in the cultivation world. Of course, Lu Ping's hard work and luck played a huge part in this, but the root cause was the North Sea Wave Listening Scripture's outstanding cultivation method. After Lu Ping fused with such wonderful heaven-level spirit objects, the water property in his real essence was really rare in the world. It could be said that if Lu Ping melted a drop of real essence into a pool of spiritual water, then depending on the amount of spiritual water and the degree of the real essence, the spiritual property in the spiritual water would be comparable to any heaven-level spirit object, ranging from heaven-level low-grade to heaven-level high-grade. Of course, real essence water could not be used as heaven-level spirit water unless it was absolutely necessary. This was because real essence water was usually the fusion of several heaven-level spirit objects, and there was no longer a pure spiritual property in it. However, just as Lu Ping inserted his real essence into the silk handkerchief, he suddenly found a spiritual property that was far more spiritual than Lu Ping's real essence. This kind of spiritual property was not as pure as heaven-level spirit objects. On the contrary, it was like the refined real essence of spirit objects. It was a kind of man-made object. However, Lu Ping soon found that there was more than one spiritual property hidden in the silk handkerchief. He soon found a second one, and then a third one. When Lu Ping's real essence had soaked the whole silk handkerchief, he finally confirmed that there were only 3 spiritual property in the silk handkerchief. What was this? Lu Ping summoned Linglong's wine cauldron from the side of the Dharma idol. Since the last time when he tried to stop Hanya Laozu from self-destructing, Linglong had been in a state of deep sleep. Lu Ping knew that Linglong's vitality had been injured this time. Although it was difficult to control the real essence of a great cultivator, if she could really control it, it would be an excellent opportunity to improve her own quality. However, at this time, he had to wake Linglong from her deep sleep. Linglong was extremely familiar and sensitive to all kinds of spiritual liquids in the world. Perhaps she could guess a thing or two about this kind of spiritual liquid that Lu Ping had never seen before. Linglong reluctantly put the silk handkerchief in the wine cauldron. The Dharma idol spat out a mouthful of original dragon breath, and the wine cauldron immediately began to spin. Ah! In just a moment, Linglong's scream came from the wine cauldron. The Dharma idol immediately stopped, and the wine cauldron also stopped spinning. Linglong came out of the wine cauldron and said, "Brother, the things on this silk handkerchief are very precious, I want them." The Dharma idol sat on the lotus and said, "Do you have a way to separate the 3 spiritual property from the silk handkerchief?" Linglong's face suddenly became bitter, and she shook her head. Lu Ping couldn't help but feel a little disappointed, but he still asked, "Do you know what these 3 spiritual property are?" Linglong hesitated and said, "They seem to be tears." Tears? Lu Ping couldn't help but be surprised. But then Lu Ping also felt that it might really be tears. Wasn't a handkerchief originally used to wipe sweat, tears, and the like? It was reasonable to say that there were tears in the silk handkerchief. However, these tears were too mysterious. The 3 drops of tears soaked in the silk handkerchief for a long time without drying up. Moreover, thinking about the spirituality contained in the silk handkerchief that even Lu Ping's own Jin Yuan couldn't compare to. It seemed that the original owner of these tears was on the verge of being revealed. The tears of the Luan Taoist. As for the reason, it seemed to be easy to explain. Jiao Daoren had left a message on this silk handkerchief, and even said that he would die for her. So it was only natural that the Luan Taoist would be moved to tears. As for why he was so sure that the tears in the silk handkerchief definitely belonged to the Luan Taoist, Lu Ping looked at the Kai Luan at the bottom right corner of the silk handkerchief, and didn't seem to have any other guesses. Moreover, other than the Luan Taoist's identity as the seventh patriarch of opening up the sky, what other tears could exist in this silk handkerchief for such a long time without drying up? Lu Ping immediately thought of something, and his divine will descended into the house of gold, immediately forming a shadow of Lu Ping. This was also a remarkable ability that Lu Ping had mastered after advancing to the mid-Dharma stage. In other words, it was the image of divine will technique, which was actually the condensation of one's own divine will into a projection, which could be used to converse with someone who wasn't in front of him. This was originally a technique that could only be mastered after advancing to the late Dharma stage. Now that Lu Ping's level of practice had stabilized, he could also use the image of divine will technique. The projection held the silk handkerchief and called Lu Qiner over, instructing her. Qiner, can you see if you can feel what's in the silk handkerchief? Lu Qiner's divine will entered the handkerchief, and she could not help but frown. Then, she tried to use her inner yuan to enter the handkerchief, but the silk handkerchief had long been filled with Lu Ping's own inner yuan. There was no way that Lu Qiner could fight against Lu Ping's inner yuan. Without waiting for Lu Ping to say anything, Lu Qiner let out a cry of surprise and almost fell. Lu Ping's image of divine will was directed towards Lu Qiner, and a thick wave of inner yuan was injected into Lu Qiner's body through the air. Only then did he say, Qiner, try again this time. Although she had the support of Lu Ping's inner yuan, Lu Qiner still carefully reached out to touch the silk handkerchief. After making sure that there was no backlash from Lu Ping's inner yuan, she then followed the guidance of Lu Ping's inner yuan and began to search for the 3 teardrops hidden in the silk handkerchief. Lu Qiner's expression suddenly became pious, and her eyelids twitched. Clearly, she was extremely excited at this time. Lu Ping softly asked, Qiner, how is it? As soon as he said this, Lu Qiner actually knelt down towards the silk handkerchief, and then she piously returned the silk handkerchief to Lu Ping, saying, Big brother, this silk handkerchief contains the sacred relic of Qin-er's ancestor. It seems to be tears? Lu Ping's heart became even more certain, and he asked, Does Qin-er know if this is a sacred relic left behind by the ancestor of the Luan clan? Lu Qiner shook her head and said, Qin-er can only feel that these 3 teardrops contain a vast amount of qi from the ancestor of the Luan clan, and it will be of great help to Qin-er's growth. As for which ancestor of the Luan clan Qin-er doesn't know. However, this ancestor must be very powerful, and Qin-er can't imagine that these 3 teardrops can contain such great power. Lu Ping noticed the excitement on Lu Qiner's face, so he asked softly, Qin-er, are you confident you can extract the senior's relic from the silk handkerchief? I'm sure they will be very useful to you, right? Lu Qiner thought for a moment, and then shook her head saying, Qin-er's cultivation is not high enough. Qin-er's instincts can sense these things, and they will be of great benefit to Qin-er in the future. However, Qin-er is far from being able to absorb and refine them now. Lu Ping couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Originally, he thought that even if Lu Qiner couldn't extract the teardrops from the silk handkerchief, if she could absorb a portion of them, she would be able to break through to the 9th layer of core forging and condense a high-grade golden core. However, this was clearly not something that the current Lu Qiner could enjoy. For a moment, Lu Ping seemed to be at a loss of what to do. If he couldn't extract the 3 teardrops, then he would be unable to use the ready-made treasures. With no other choice, Lu Ping could only put all his energy back into the 20 handkerchief handwriting of Jiao Daoren. He wanted to see if he could comprehend a trace of the essence of swordsmanship hidden in Jiao Daoren's handwriting. However, at this moment, Lu Ping suddenly discovered that the dragon Dharma idol had unknowingly spat out the pure yang pearl, and it was currently floating above the silk handkerchief. Lu Ping was stunned. His divine sense penetrated the pure yang pearl, and to his surprise, he discovered that traces of pure yang qi were being emitted from the silk handkerchief and were gathering towards the pure yang pearl in midair. Even the teardrops contained pure yang qi. No matter how Lu Ping thought about it, he was afraid that only a mighty figure like Luan Daoist could achieve this state of plucking a hair to benefit the world. Lu Ping was naturally overjoyed. Although he had spent most of his energy on the silk handkerchief while drifting on the Qingming River, Lu Ping's cultivation had still ushered in a period of rapid growth. The reason was that after Lu Ping had survived the first lightning tribulation, the pure yang soul of flying Laozu had condensed into a ball of essence, which was being continuously absorbed by the dragon Dharma idol. As the dragon Dharma idol absorbed, refined, and fused with the pure yang qi, the pure yang pearl was gradually refined by the dragon Dharma idol. Unknowingly, it made Lu Ping think of a divine object like the dragon pearl. However, in this world, other than the Longhui ancestor, the word dragon had never appeared, let alone the dragon pearl. Just as the pure yang qi that was hidden in the teardrops in the silk handkerchief was absorbed by the pure yang pearl, Lu Ping's divine sense suddenly discovered that the 3 teardrops had come alive. Of course, it was not that the 3 teardrops had come alive, but that the 3 teardrops were finally no longer as indifferent to any of Lu Ping's methods as before. Under Linglong's repeated confirmation and Lu Ping's repeated promises, Linglong finally agreed to help Lu Ping extract the 3 teardrops from the silk handkerchief. The condition was naturally that Linglong would leave enough benefits in the teardrops. Therefore, Linglong had already decided that after absorbing the essence of the phoenix teardrops, it would be time for Lu Ping to summon the second lightning tribulation. Chapter 1176. The 3 teardrops were carefully placed into a jade essence bottle by Lu Ping. After thinking for a bit, Lu Ping poured out another teardrop into his palm and began to sense its aura. After all, this was something from Sky Splitter Laozu. Even though it was only a teardrop, perhaps it contained something useful to Lu Ping. As for the other teardrop, Lu Ping didn't give it to Linglong or Lu Qiner. Lu Qiner wanted this teardrop to sense the aura of Luan Daoist. Lu Qiner was a wind and fire dual cultivator, but this teardrop was a water source in the end, so it wouldn't be of too much help to her own cultivation. What was truly useful to the main body was Linglong, so despite Linglong's reluctance, Lu Ping still gave the teardrop to Lu Qiner first to sense it. Lu Ping himself was also carefully inspecting one of the Luan teardrops. Just before, after Lu Ping used the pure yang bead to strip away the trace of pure yang energy from the 3 Luan teardrops, there was a moment when the talisman Lu Ping condensed. In the Dharma manifestation's auspicious cloud throbbed. Lu Ping's senses were sharp. In just an instant, he discovered that the talisman that was affected by the Luan's aura was actually the talisman that Lu Ping had been trying to cultivate for a long time, but had failed twice. The bubbling sky-filling sword art was an extremely strange technique. Although it was a water attribute technique, it carried a trace of something related to the fire attribute. Originally, this sword technique of Lu Ping might be a dual cultivator of water and fire, but at his current level of cultivation, his vision and knowledge were far from what it used to be. Soon, he found that this sword technique was not like that. Instead, it was greatly influenced by Xie Tianyang. Back when Xie Tianyang exchanged the cultivation method of the boiling sky sword technique from Lu Ping, he said that there was a senior of Purple Sun Palace, Laozu, who believed that this sword technique had many wondrous uses and revelations for fire and water. It was also very useful for cultivators who cultivated these 2 attributes, so he exchanged the sword technique with Lu Ping. But in reality, Lu Ping was misled by Xie Tianyang. It was not that this sword technique was completely unrelated to the fire attribute, but this sword technique was a genuine water attribute sword technique. However, in the process of cultivating this sword technique, if one wanted to achieve success, they would need an external help. Or perhaps this should be a dual cultivator sword technique. This external assistance was a fire-attributed sword technique, or fire-attributed divine ability, that was compatible with the bubbling heaven sword art. The so-called fire and water complementing each other didn't mean that the cultivator who cultivated this sword art had to cultivate both fire and water at the same time. Instead, the cultivator who cultivated another fire-attributed sword technique, or fire-attributed cultivation method, needed to lend a helping hand. Only then would the cultivator be able to reach the highest realm of this sword art. The ancestors of the overwhelming sky sect described this sword technique as a pot of hot soup that needed fire to be added to boil. In fact, this was not wrong. However, the boiling hot soup was still separated from the fire by a layer of the pot. In the end, it couldn't be considered true fire and water complementing each other, but it was borrowing the power of the fire. But now, for some inexplicable reason, the Luan's tear bead had become a catalyst for Lu Ping's sky-boiling sword art. The tear was still based on water. In the past, the Luan Taoist didn't only use fire attribute abilities to dominate the world. However, the Luan Taoist himself liked to live in places with volcanoes and magma. These places were all extremely rich in fire attribute origin energy. Because of this, the Fire Phoenix clan was the most powerful among the direct descendants of the Luan Taoist. Moreover, the Fire Phoenix clan believed that the Luan Taoist was originally from the Fire Phoenix clan. However, when one reached the level of the Luan Taoist, there were no clear differences between water, fire, wood or wind spells. This was why the descendants didn't know the origin of the Luan Taoist. If this was really the case, then the Luan Taoist tear contained a strong fire attribute origin energy. However, the tear itself still appeared as a tear. This made sense. After all, the abilities of the Sky Splitter Laozu were not something that these cultivators could figure out. Lu Ping knew that this was his chance. Following the inexplicable aura in the teardrop, the spinning chain kill talisman suddenly shone brightly and absorbed the teardrop that was once soaked in the fire element into the talisman. Then, the dragon avatar suddenly raised its head, and the reverse scale on its neck shone with a purplish golden light. The talisman was attracted to the reverse scale and began to construct a new skill seed. In the blink of an eye, Lu Ping had acquired another great innate skill. Among the 4 fundamental abilities of the Boiling Sky Sword technique, the Serial Killing technique, the Seeping Sword technique, and the Drowning Sword technique had all been successfully condensed into great abilities. Only the Boiling Water Sword technique, which Lu Ping had always been clueless about, was left. Not even the talisman had been formed in the Dharma Manifestation's auspicious cloud. Naturally, Lu Ping would not let go of this opportunity. In the middle of the Dharma Manifestation's auspicious cloud, a purple-golden mist suddenly began to condense, rolling like boiling water. Even the whole core space was filled with the sound of water boiling. The Boiling Water Sword technique, which he had been studying for many years, was suddenly formed at this moment. After an unknown amount of time, in the middle of the Dharma Manifestation's auspicious cloud, a talisman gradually condensed. No matter where this talisman swam in the auspicious cloud, the auspicious cloud around it suddenly began to churn violently, as if it was boiling. The magical talisman of the Boiling Water Sword technique was finally condensed. Naturally, Lu Ping wouldn't let go of such a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He focused all his attention on his heart core, and the serial whirlwind kill that he condensed into the seed of the Boiling Water Sword skill, Seeping Water Sword skill, and Drowning Water Sword skill immediately became the bridge between the Boiling Water Sword skill, Seeping Water Sword skill, and Drowning Sword skill. The Dharma manifestation of the dragon was churning up and down in the core space, and the real essence in Lu Ping's blood was like a flowing river, gathering all the real essence into the core space. The sound of the Qingming River flowing towards the south had been replaced by the sound of Gulyalu Gulyalu. On the surface of the river, with a radius of more than 1,000 feet around Black Tortoise, the Qingming River seemed to be boiling, and a large number of bubbles appeared. Countless Kuei water essence was absorbed from the river and gathered in Lu Ping's body. Lu Ping's clothes were suddenly all wet. At the same time, Lu Ping's black tortoise also benefited. Taking advantage of the time when Lu Ping was absorbing the essence of the Qingming River, Black Tortoise greedily absorbed the essence of the water, and its cultivation began to grow rapidly. At this time, Lu Ping simply released Samling, letting the three of them take the opportunity to cultivate, and at the same time, protect him when he was in closed-door cultivation. As the sun rose and set, the upstream and downstream of the Qingming River, where Lu Ping was located, within a radius of 5 miles, was filled with the mist of the river, and it lasted for 2 years. The strange scene of the dense fog, sealing the river, naturally quickly attracted the attention of the nearby cultivators. Some cultivators were attracted over, and took the risk to enter the fog to investigate the situation. But they suddenly discovered that this place was actually filled with dense water element spirit energy. These cultivators were naturally overjoyed. To be able to gather such rich spiritual qi, there must be some great treasure in the Qingming River, so they naturally wanted to explore further into the depths of the mist. Unexpectedly, before they could go deeper, they were inexplicably knocked out by an attack and thrown out of the Qingming River. However, this method not only did not stop the greed of the cultivators, but also made the news spread more and more widely, attracting the attention of more cultivators, including some high-level cultivators in the sections. However, when these late core forging adepts, who were high and mighty in the eyes of ordinary cultivators, entered the mist and were thrown out of the Qingming River like dead dogs, finally a portion of the cultivators realized that something was wrong and slowly began to retreat. However, such a strange scene happening on the Qingming River, in the end, there was still a portion of cultivators who were unconvinced and called for the intervention of Fa Xiang Laozu. However, when other Dharma adepts entered the fog, they would usually hear an earth-shattering battle from within the fog, after which everything became silent. Just as the cultivators outside the fog were wondering what was going on, the Dharma adept walked out of the fog with a strange look on his face. He then warned the cultivators waiting outside the fog that the person in the middle of the Qingming River was a powerful cultivator who was cultivating in seclusion. They were not to enter and disturb the senior cultivator's cultivation. When the news spread, many of the cultivators who thought that it was some kind of treasure were naturally disappointed, and they all turned back. Some greedy cultivators saw that even Fa Xiang Laozu could not do anything about it, and could only suppress the greed in their hearts. However, there were still some cultivators who stayed outside the mist, trying to use the dense water-based spiritual qi in the mist to start cultivating, and the powerful cultivator hidden in the mist obviously did not make a move to chase these cultivators away. And just as these Dharma adepts left, the cultivation world finally spread another piece of shocking news. There was a powerful cultivator of the green sea snakes swimming in the Qingming River to cultivate in seclusion, causing the mist to lock the river. The news was accurate. One after another, a few Dharma adepts entered the mist to investigate, but they were blocked by the combined forces of 3 green sea snakes. These 3 green sea snakes were a wind snake, a water snake, and an ice snake, all of which had the authentic bloodline of the green sea snakes. The 3 snakes were all at the peak of the core forging stage, but their abilities were not inferior to the direct disciples of the 5 Holy Lands who had condensed a 9th-grade golden core. The 3 snakes joined forces to fight against every Dharma adept that entered the mist, and then explained the reason to them. It turned out that the elders of these 3 green sea snakes suddenly had an epiphany when they were traveling in the Qingming River, and so they began to cultivate in seclusion in the Qingming River. The 3 young cultivators naturally had to protect their elders. As for the mist that filled the sky, it was formed by the powerful cultivator of the green sea snakes, who had extracted the essence of the water element from the Qingming River during his cultivation. Many early Dharma adepts had been defeated by the 3 of them, and even 2 mid-Dharma adepts from mid-sized sects had entered the mist, but in the end, they did not have the upper hand. Even if there were strong mid-Dharma adepts who had the upper hand, after the 3 snakes revealed their identities, they all showed signs of fear. No one was willing to offend the green sea snakes for no reason, You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.